Chapter 1226. The distinctive ancient city was silently buried under the snow that was more than 100 meters deep. No one cared about it, and no one knew about it. The deepest part of the city was still covered in snow. According to Nuashing's census, the deepest part of the city was probably 1,000 meters deep. It was a huge city, and it was not much smaller than the exaggerated version of the small cities in the realm of the gods. It was only 10 times smaller than the latter. It was purely because the cities in the realm of the gods were ridiculously huge. It was an exception. The style of the ancient lost city buried under the ice and snow was completely different from all the cities on this continent. It gave off an ancient feeling of the vicissitudes of time, as if the world had turned upside down. Everywhere, there were buildings destroyed by the thick ice and snow, buried alive by the ice and snow. According to the traces of the collapsed buildings, they should have been buried by an avalanche, a huge avalanche. Some of the buildings that were still intact had some special traces on the edges. Looking down at the entire building, one could feel that it was extraordinary. However, after all, it had been eroded by time for many years. The snow and ice could not completely preserve the wreckage here. When the snow and ice receded, some of the buildings were released from the ice, and the power that had been lost for countless years suddenly burst out. There were some small-scale collapses and decay in the city. Nuashing had tried her best to protect them, but she could not remove the power that had been accumulated over countless years. She could only let the parts of the buildings that had decayed and collapsed carefully to prevent them from affecting the buildings next to them. However, the entire city had been destroyed beyond recognition. It was a far cry from its former glory. Even if the life forms that had once lived here returned, it would be difficult to recognize it at first glance. Big guy, the lost city. It's the lost city that teacher talked about. Qinglei screamed excitedly. She grabbed the big guy's sleeve and shook him so hard that his huge body was shaking. It was not clear if she was shaking him with all her strength. The big guy laughed bitterly. His face was also filled with excitement. Even if he did not go to the heart of the snowy mountain, he had succeeded in obtaining a huge secret. It was not a wasted trip. The lost city is... Nuashing asked without looking back. He controlled the snow in front of him to spread out around every building in the broken ancient city. He had seen the lost city last night in a book left behind by Qinglei's teacher. However, there was no detailed record. It only mentioned that there used to be a city on this continent, but it was gone. That was the original meaning of the sentence in the book. Perhaps the scholar had passed on more information to Qinglei and the others orally. Qinglei and the big guy recovered from their excitement. Although they calmed down a little, there was still some excitement in their eyes. Qinglei blinked and said, "It's normal that you don't know about it. It probably only exists in my teacher's records. It's the only book." A city left behind by the life of the last quarter? It asked casually. It could feel the aura of time that this city carried. It was very ancient, and had experienced at least 6 digits of time. Well, it's hard to say. The big guy frowned. He was excited just a moment ago, but now he had to explain himself. He looked embarrassed. "Actually, I don't know very well. I'll make it short. The lost city, well, it's a general name for this kind of ancient city. The only thing special about it is that it is built with grayish-blue building materials. It doesn't refer to this ancient city in particular. There used to be many such ancient cities in this world. Well, it refers to this era. During the ancient times of this quarter, it was a very popular research topic. People kept guessing and trying to find out where it came from. Qinglei took over the topic. Actually, there's nothing to find out. It's just something related to the last quarter. However, some people don't believe it. And at that time, it was a guy who had a lot of authority. He publicly denied that this thing came from an even older time. He only said that there was another group of life that existed earlier in this quarter. Nuashing raised his head. "And then? How did you determine what period the life of the last quarter came from?" "Time. I'll talk about that later." Qinglei swayed her fiery red hair and continued. "Later, it was that guy who spoke so firmly, as if he was the one who was left behind in the previous season. He forcefully changed the news, but I don't know the details." It said that the method at that time was very extreme. Some old scholars couldn't get a good ending. The big guy's follower whispered. But at that time, it was actually very strange. That scholar was very disgusted when others said that it came from an even older time. In fact, he didn't specify when it came from. However, he just wanted to eradicate this kind of saying. He only said that it came from an even older time. The big guy counted with his fingers and showed a thoughtful expression. Isn't that crazy? Ancient ruins discovered in this world, other than life that existed earlier than them. Who else could have stayed behind? Visitors from outer space? Yin Nuashing and the little angel both shrunk their necks. Yin Nuashing finally understood. He can't say that it was a moment ago. He can't say that it was a moment ago. He can't say that it was a long time ago. He has to say that it was a few minutes ago or a few years ago. That guy must be oversensitive. Why did he try to hide it in a panic? There must be something fishy going on. Qing Lei and the big guy both smiled bitterly. The former said, after that, there was a lot of trouble. There was no record of the middle part. The previous part was also what the teacher told us, that such unknown things had happened. They're all out of print records. After that, the analysis of the lost city it was a historical creation that couldn't be identified. It was estimated that it existed 90,000 years ago. However, the teacher speculated that the lost city that was discovered, after eliminating all interference factors, might have existed 210,000 years ago. It originated a little earlier than this quarter and existed in large quantities in the world. Most of them existed in the wilderness far away from the current city, or in the Dian Black Sea, or some places that were covered in fog all year round. Their time of existence was very close to the time of the last quarter, but there was a gap of time. Gap? Yin Nuashing raised his eyebrows. What was the time of the last quarter? I want your answer. My father said that the end of the last quarter originated from 250,000 years ago. He couldn't find the time of the beginning of that quarter. He could only find the time when it ended. However, he said that this answer shouldn't be accurate. It should be pushed back a little, the big guy said. Yin Nuashing pondered for a while. He looked at the lost ancient city in front of him, but did not say anything. In his senses, this city had been buried under ice and snow for at least 400,000 years. Then, it might have existed even earlier. The time span was too large. The larger the time span, the more ridiculous the error would be. His answer was the standard answer. 400,000 years ago, this so-called lost city was a relic left behind by the life of the last quarter. This was the answer he gave, and there was no mistake about it, unless there was some special existence in this world that misled him, or the so-called 250,000 years were also wrong. In that case, this was not his fault. Although I don't know why that powerful scholar was so eager to deny it. From that point of view, I think he should have known about the life of the last quarter and recognized the lost city. That's why he denied it in a panic when others brought it up. He was overly guilty, it whispered in his ear. Trying to cover it up only makes it more conspicuous. However, there shouldn't be many people who dared to object at that time. Those who objected might have been. Yin Nuashing used his thumb to swipe across his neck. The little angel also nodded. That's about it. It said that the lost cities that have been discovered so far. This one doesn't count. So far, the last lost city that was discovered was 200 years ago. That's one less than half of the total number. A scholar boldly speculated that there are lost cities in every corner of this world. In fact, this world is much bigger than we thought, Qing Lei said. Yin Nuashing rolled his eyes. He hadn't even measured the ground under his feet. How could it be that the world was much bigger than he thought? Speaking of which, did the scholar who boldly speculated know how big the world was? The history and all the records corresponding to the lost cities are called the Lost Era. The life that once existed is called the Lost Clan, and they can never be found. Just like how there are still vague remnants of information from the last quarter in this world, there are still people who have recorded ancient information. However, the origin of the Lost Era can't be found at all. It can't be categorized into any system. There are no rules, no beginning, and no records that can be understood. Sometimes, lost relics are found, but there is no way to decipher the words on them. The big man shrugged. Yin Nuashing and the little angel were both stunned. There is information from the last quarter in this world that could be understood, but there was no information from the lost era that could be deciphered. How could this be explained? According to their interpretation, the lost era was the last quarter that disappeared. But now that they heard it, was there something they didn't know? Or were they really misled by something? In any case, that thing seems to have appeared out of thin air. It doesn't follow the pattern, and there is no successor. It's like a ghost. When you think it's an illusion, new relics will appear to make things difficult for you. Qing Lei and the others had already recovered from the excitement and joy of their discovery. The two of them shrugged. Qing Lei scratched her red hair and said, "Finding the lost ruins is a very stylish thing, especially for such a big city. Relatively speaking, it has been preserved in a more complete state than what we've found before." Yin Nuoxing looked up at the sky. So this was a topic that could be used to show off, right? Actually, you don't care what the hell it has to do with the last quarter, right? Because your teacher already said that it was right, so you didn't delve into it at all. Then why did he study it for so long? Qing Lei scratched her hair for a long time and suddenly laughed heartily. Then, she looked at Yin Nuoxing and asked, "Big sister, what do you think?" "I don't want to see it." Yin Nuoxing rolled her eyes and said, "Why do you care about these things? They're the last words left by the dead in the past. They are just obsessions that are unwilling to completely disappear. Someone will remember these, but it's more important to bring them forward. No matter what, these are the lives that once existed in this world. The successors should carry the thoughts and obsessions of the predecessors and continue to move forward and should not be dragged down." The little angel glanced at him. This guy, was he saying something? Even if he said this, they wouldn't be able to understand. Not everyone had witnessed the scene of the world turning into dust. Qing Lei and the big guy looked at him in surprise. This extraordinaire had always given them a different feeling. At this moment, the answer made them feel very special again. Living in a world that was full of relics and surrounded by mystery, almost everyone was keen to search for the past. Very few people would have such an idea, carrying the thoughts and obsessions of the predecessors and continuing to move forward. It was really a very shocking way of saying it. It made them feel refreshed in front of their eyes. But if you want to say it, I think this is actually left behind by the lives of the previous quarter. Yin Nuoxing stretched out her finger and twirled her long hair in front of her. Or, there was an unknown small era in the middle of the previous quarter. It appeared and disappeared in a hurry, leaving behind a large area of traces that covered the world. Countless people scratched their heads to think about it. That's also possible. Back then, under the majesty of the powerful scholar, this is a saying that was rarely left behind. But it's a little different from what Big Sister said. That scholar said that the small era Big Sister mentioned actually coexisted with the ancient era. It means that the two coexisted, but they were not of the same race. So, they were also the lives of that quarter. It's just that they are of a completely different kind from what we understand now. So, no matter how hard we try, we can't find a way to interpret the lost relics. If that's the case, this world should have been dominated by the lives of the small era. Yin Nuoxing's eyes flashed slightly. They have most of the lives, so the same traces about them are all over the world. On the contrary, the lives of the previous quarter are known to be a small race. In this world, there are only traces left behind from the previous quarter, right? Yes. Qing Lei nodded. If that's the case, the situation is reversed. It's very strange. The once powerful race is gone. Instead, it's the small race that has become the dominator of this world. The situation has taken a 180-degree turn. In the case where the number of lives is not enough, it can't be called a race or a civilization. It can't dominate an era. Do you understand what I mean? Yin Nuoxing said. The big guy pondered for a moment. Then, he carefully asked his question. In other words, something big happened that was enough to reverse everything. Theoretically, that's the case. Qing Lei and the big guy couldn't help but look at each other. They really didn't delve into this question before. The little angel paused for a moment. Then, she suddenly said, "Where is the best preserved relic of the lost race?" Qing Lei sighed and spread her hands. "It's only the one in front of us." Yin Nuashing and the little angel were both stunned. The lost relics have existed for too long, and they're all sealed in places where people rarely go. Just like the lost ancient city that we found. I can't make a clear judgment, but it may have existed for hundreds of thousands of years. Even if it was sealed in ice, when it was suddenly exposed and freed from its stagnant state, it will inevitably collapse bit by bit. The lost relics that we found in the past are now only pictures in books and some incomplete pictures. Although the one in front of us is very big, the speed of its collapse will also be very fast. In less than 10 days, it will completely disintegrate into the air. Yin Nuashing was speechless. Indeed, he had just wrapped the ancient city with his power of the soul, so he knew the state of the ancient city better than anyone else. He could sense that it was waking up from its deep sleep. The power that spanned hundreds of thousands of years was gradually acting on those buildings. They were slowly falling apart. Unfortunately, he probably had no way to stop these things from collapsing. His power was not suitable for this. There was no way to stop something that should have been completely destroyed hundreds of thousands of years ago. He could use his divine power to stabilize it, but then it would become a specimen. When the time came, some extraordinary people would come here to inspect it, and they would be able to feel the unfathomable power. God knew what kind of accident would happen. Tampering with the relics was the easiest way to affect history. It was already difficult for future generations to explore history. They had to dig, read, and imagine. It was better for him not to make it more difficult for others. I know a few places that once existed here and there, but there's nothing left in those places. The entire site has turned into dust, leaving only a big, empty pit there. Qing Lei said as she looked at the remains of the lost ruins around her. Even so, this trip was not in vain. Even if I didn't go to the center of the snow mountain, I don't have too many regrets. There are still many opportunities for the latter. But to find a lost ruin, that's the luck of a lifetime. Yin Nuashing glanced at her and said leisurely, "To put it bluntly, you have the capital to brag. It's enough for you to brag for a few decades, right?" Qing Lei turned her head away awkwardly. Aren't all explorers like this? They're all bragging about what I've found, what you've seen, what we've gained from this trip, and what mysteries we've uncovered. Looking at the scale of this lost city, I might even be able to name it after me. This magnificent and splendid. The once splendid lost city had been sleeping under the ice and snow for 400,000 years. Its glory and splendor had faded away. The frozen time and frozen history had thawed after a long period of time, and everything had started to run again. This time, it was heading towards destruction, continuing the destruction that had not ended 400,000 years ago. However, it was still considered complete. Its main structure was still intact. It could last for at least 10 days. These 10 days were enough for a large number of explorers and scholars to do a lot of things. Qing Lei and her small team could also become famous overnight, but this did not seem to be their original purpose. Looking at Qing Lei's smug expression, Yin Nuashing knew that she had already begun to imagine a lot of things that would happen later. She crossed her arms in annoyance. Have you forgotten something? Are we still going to the center of the snow mountain? Qing Lei quickly came back to her senses. She looked dignified. Yes, of course. We still have to go. That's our destination. Chapter 1227. The magnificent palace still retained its flashy but impractical decorations. These buildings still looked very tough. Even if a certain luminous object jumped on them, it would not cause any adverse effects. It did not collapse a second time, or 3 times, or countless times plus one collapse. It seemed that other than those fancy decorations, the strength of these buildings was still quite good. After being hit by an avalanche of millions of tons, they did not collapse instantly. Instead, they stood firm for hundreds of thousands of years. Their strength could be seen at a glance. Under the leadership of Qing Lei, Yin Nuashing and the others were like a group of small ants entering the city of the giant dragon. They walked on the road that was already covered in snow and bent by the ice and snow. They passed through the main city gate that was hundreds of meters high. They passed through the palace that was smashed in front and behind. They kept going deeper and deeper. Adventure. Well, adventure. Washing took a deep breath. He definitely did not see the big guy's little brothers knocking the bricks there. He did not see it. It must be an illusion. I can't knock it down. The broken pieces are too big. Lei put down a knife in her hand and could not help but mutter. It was exactly what she said just now. They were going to the heart of the snowy mountain. Who would have thought that they would find such a big thing halfway? Now, they did not have any tools in hand. The building fragments in front of them were too sturdy. They could not dig out a piece even if they wanted to. Washing lifted his bangs and slapped his forehead. He could not help but ask, "What are you doing?" "Knock a brick and bring it back. It can be used as evidence that this place has seen the light of day again. There are no relics of the Lost Clan left behind now. Those have all turned to dust in time. So, as long as you bring a brick back, it can prove that you have found a dust-covered lost relic." Washing muttered in his heart. He did not say anything. He just followed Lei and the others deep into the lost city. There were many exaggerated and gorgeous sculptures in the city, but they were not used to commemorate or worship anything. It seemed that making them look exaggerated was just a habit. It was a habit to make everything look beautiful and perfect. There was no symbolic meaning or even any meaning. It was just a decoration purely used to dress up. He could not decipher it. It was true. He understood the meaning of these 4 words. He could not decipher it. Throughout his 10 or so eras, dozens of eras of life, his footprints were all over the void. Perhaps it was also all over the great Yuan realm. He had visited and observed countless worlds. The information of countless worlds was recorded in the Book of Epics. Then, a kind of information that he could not decipher or understand at all suddenly appeared. He did not even know if it was complete or not. Only God knew what he had seen in the 20 minutes he had been here. Some of the corners of the ruins, some of the patterns, some of the special decorations, the arrangement of the buildings, and many other things could be inferred from these corners. But from the moment he came in, he had only received a lot of messy information that could not be connected. The existence of this lost, ancient city seemed to be purely for the sake of existence. "Big sister, what are you thinking about?" Lei noticed that Washing seemed to be in a dilemma. He had a pensive look on his face. He frowned from time to time and looked like he was about to collapse. She could not help but move closer to him curiously. She seemed to have guessed what he was thinking about. "Are you analyzing this lost city?" "Huh. Don't waste your brain. Many scholars have done this since ancient times, but in the end, they did not get anything. If you want to forcefully decipher something, you need to fill in a little bit of information with your brain. However, you can only get a series of scattered information fragments that cannot be integrated. Isn't this too baffling?" Washing frowned. Logically speaking, this lost city should have some patterns. However, he could only see one of them, so he could not tell. There were so many records from ancient times. If all of them were to be put together, there should be something in common. There should be something in common. It's just baffling. Lei put her hands behind her back. She did not knock on the bricks anymore. She just followed beside him and said softly, "The things left behind by the Lost Clan are used to force people to their deaths. Many scholars have gathered all the lost ruins that were discovered tens of thousands of years ago and carried out countless years of research. In the end, it was just a waste of effort. Isn't this just a prank?" Washing rolled his eyes. "Even so, there are still many people rushing to find the lost ruins? Or will there be many people coming to find out what's going on? At the very least, they will come out to take a look." That's right. We just happen to be in the first batch of people. If we receive the news later, Big Guy and I would still postpone our plans at that time and travel thousands of miles to take a look. Many people are like that. As long as they receive news about the lost ruins, they would come to take a look no matter the cost. Lei nodded. She rolled her eyes and laughed. Then, they will look at a pile of meaningless bricks. After taking a few detours, Washing finally gave up his unrealistic guess. In fact, whether he had a guess or not was another matter. In the past 10 minutes, he only felt that there was a lot of meaningless information that urgently needed to be processed in his mind. At first, he racked his brain, but later he gave up thinking. Maybe it was just like what Qing Lei and the others said. There was nothing left behind in the lost ruins. It was just a huge ice sculpture. He felt that this explanation made sense. As for what the ancient city sculpture was used for, "Boss, big sister, there's something here." About a street away, the big guy's underling roared, causing Qing Lei and Yun Nuoxing to raise their heads. They looked at each other and hurriedly rushed in the direction of the sound. Yun Nuoxing also temporarily dropped the idea that had just popped up. He raised his hand to grab the little angel that was bouncing on the side and clamp her in his armpit before running away. A minute later, they surrounded a big hole and looked down. It was still surrounded by snow. It was a big hole buried in the snow. It should be part of a building. It was about 100 meters wide, and they couldn't see how deep it was. It was a very straight shaft. The walls of the shaft were also engraved with many prosperous and meaningless patterns and sculptures that appeared in the ancient city. Their only purpose seemed to be to make the walls of the shaft uneven. Yun Nuoxing looked up and looked around. It was very empty, like a square was deliberately used to place a big well. However, there were some marks on the ground around it. It seemed like it was used to place something heavy on the ground. He looked around again, focusing on the direction of the avalanche. After a while, he found what he was looking for. Then, he put the pieces together in his mind. There should be a tower here. Yun Nuoxing gestured with his hands and pointed to the marks on the ground. The ground around here should be the supporting part of the tower. If that's the case, the part buried in the ground should also be part of the tower. The upper and lower parts are separated by the ground. "Wow, big sister, you restored it so quickly," Qing Lei exclaimed. Her eyes were filled with admiration. Yun Nuoxing grinned unnaturally when he saw this. "A tower that separates the upper and lower parts? What's that for?" Big Guy scratched his head. "This is probably near the west side of the ancient city. No, this is the center of the ancient city." Yun Nuoxing shook his head and pointed further away. "The place further west has been destroyed. An avalanche back then completely destroyed the higher west side. Now there's still some scattered building fragments under the snow that have not been dug out. Most of the fragments and buildings in the entire west side of the city have been knocked to the ground or sent to the east side of the city. The center of the ancient city, that should be a very important building." Big Guy's eyes flashed. The buildings in the center of Juguang City are the headquarters of the explorers. There's a light condensing board on the top of the tower that was modified by a conjurer. It is used to absorb the light of Wei Su. That's why it's called Juguang City. "Oh, there is such a thing." Yun Nuoxing was a little surprised. That light condensing board absorbs so much light. What is it used for? To recharge some of the curses in Juguang City? For example, the curses in the city, such as the curse lamp, needed to be powered by energy. Ordinary people could not mobilize energy. Only extraordinaries, or some extraordinaries, could control it. So, he immediately thought of that use. But that use seemed a little too simple. The big guy and Qing Lei looked at each other. Their eyes were a little solemn. The latter said softly, "The gathered energy is stored under the ground of Juguang City. Even if an extraordinaire wants to sense it, it won't be easy. As for that piece of light congealing board, other than the use you mentioned, it is also a weapon." "Huh?" Yun Nuoxing and the little angel were stunned. Weapon? There were no traces of battle in this world. They did not think that there would be any enemies in this seemingly peaceful world that would require such a level of city defense weapon to deal with. Even if there was an army of undead beasts, there was no need to use such a level of weapon. But this function seems to have been abolished. Qing Lei said something that made Yun Nuoxing dumbfounded. Seeing Yun Nuoxing's startled expression, Qing Lei couldn't help but smile bitterly. "I heard it from my teacher. Originally, Juguang City was designed according to weapons. It was probably because there was some threat or use in the distant past. Now that the world is peaceful, this weapon is useless." Yun Nuoxing looked at Qing Lei with a strange look, then looked at Big Guy and said, "He is a very magical scholar." She waved her hand and changed the topic back to the topic at hand. "So, what do you think this tower in the center has a special purpose?" In fact, 60% of the current city is built according to the layout of the buildings in the lost ancient city. This kind of important building in the center is the style of the Lost Clan. Yin Nuoxing grinned. She did not expect there to be such a relationship. Qing Lei had been staring at the bottom half of the tower. It was dark, and she could barely see the uneven marks on the wall of the well that was 10 meters deep. She could not see the bottom at all. Big guy, we did not bring the corresponding tools. Nonsense. We are going to climb the snow mountain. At first, we did not expect this kind of accident. Big guy shook his head helplessly. We can only give up. Let other guys work together to take a look. We can go back to get the curse rope for a while. Yin Nuoxing glanced at him. It is not an ordinary rope. This shaft is too deep. Normal ropes won't be enough. Speaking of normal ropes, we have some in our backpack as well. Spell ropes can extend all the way until they run out of energy. They're much tougher than normal ropes. Oh, Yin Nuoxing said. He stood on a circle of stairs on the protruding ground of the lower part of the tower and looked down. He could see the bottom of the tower, but for some reason, it was very blurry. Logically speaking, the darkness should not obstruct his vision. This made him very curious about the shaft. Moreover, he could feel a weak energy lingering in the shaft. It was weak energy that had not dissipated in time. Big sister, let's go. There's nothing to see. We can go down and take a look. Let's hurry up and check out other places. We only have an hour left, Qing Lei said as she pulled Yin Nuoxing's arm. Who told you that there's no way to go down? Yin Nuoxing smiled. Qing Lei and the others were stunned. A few seconds later, they subconsciously fixed their eyes on the little angel. Then, they let out a long oh in their hearts. Come down with me. Big guy, you guys stay here and wait, Yin Nuoxing said as he looked at Qing Lei and then at the big guy. Qing Lei twisted her body reluctantly. She seemed to be unwilling. She had crawled and crawled all over the place, but to suddenly have her fly, she felt that it was too dangerous. That cannot go. Yin Nuoxing and the little angel looked at each other. Yin Nuoxing took the lead and carried Qing Lei before she could react. At this moment, Qing Lei finally reacted. She screamed so loudly that her snow mountain was about to collapse. Wah! I don't want to die. I'm afraid of the dark. I'm afraid of death. I'm afraid of heights. Big sister, I haven't been in love and I haven't been filial to my teacher. Let me go. Don't. Save me. Without saying a word, Yin Nuoxing jumped into the well. The little angel also spread her wings and turned into a ray of light to catch up. Only the big guy and the others were left with cold sweat on their faces. Qing Lei's screams gradually faded away with the echoes in their ears. Everyone looked at each other. Their cold sweat was about to turn into ice in this world of ice and snow. Boss, big sister flew down. Will she be okay? The big guy wiped the cold sweat on his forehead and laughed dryly. Don't ask me. I don't know. Yin Nuoxing's ears were filled with the sound of the wind and Qing Lei's screams. The screams were so scary that it sounded like a chicken being killed, especially when the little angel hugged him from behind and the sound of the wind suddenly stopped. The screams were even scarier. It was especially scary in this dark shaft where there was no light. Okay, stop screaming. Focus and look around, Yin Nuoxing said helplessly. Only now did Qing Lei feel that the sense of weightlessness had disappeared. She didn't feel the excruciating pain on her body either. After hesitating for a few seconds, she carefully squinted her eyes. Then, she saw a pair of huge white wings with spots of light dispersing the nearby darkness. They illuminated the exaggerated carvings on the walls of the shaft clearly. Qing Lei looked at the pair of wings with envy. After a while, she looked at Yin Nuoxing and said, Big sister, do you all jump down when you see these kinds of underground buildings and shafts? Yin Nuoxing carefully thought about the few similar situations that she was most familiar with. She found that it was almost the same. She nodded and said, Seems like it. Qing Lei. Okay. I'm afraid we won't be able to hide from deep shafts for the rest of our lives. By the way, how deep is this place? The little angel raised his head. At this moment, he was slowly descending with the two of them. The shining hole above them was only a small dot of light. They were already very deep into this place. Do you often have this kind of encounter? Lei was a little scared when she heard that. She estimated that she might faint if she jumped down again. A tower buried underground. It's possible that energy is injected deep into the ground to store it. It's normal for it to be very deep. Back then, this shaft had a lot of energy flowing through it. Moreover, it's a tower that's divided into two parts. If my teacher is right, the bottom part may be 2 to 3,000 meters deep. What's down there? Yin Nuoxing asked casually. I don't know. Maybe it's some energy crystals that have become empty shells. Maybe it's some energy residue. Maybe it's some lost relics? Lei looked down and felt that she was going to fall at any time. She couldn't help but shrink her body. Only then did she realize that the way she was being held was a little strange. However, when she saw Yun Nuoxing's thoughtful and serious look, she didn't say anything. There are no dead beasts in these places. Yun Nuoxing suddenly thought of a problem. There are dead beasts all over the snow. Only then did I realize that there are no such things in this lost ancient city. This is also a strange phenomenon. The dead beasts won't go near the lost ancient city. If you're careful enough, you might be able to find the hidden ancient city by following the activity of the dead beasts. In history, there was an expedition team that used this method and spent 2 years to find a lost ancient city. Lei recalled what she heard before and said, "You can't find a specific reason?" Well, my teacher guessed that there's a relatively large amount of residual energy in the ancient city that hasn't dissipated. However, my teacher is not a very powerful extraordinary. There's no way to know that. As for the energy concentration, Yin Nuoxing shook his head. There is indeed residual energy in this ancient city, but it's buried very deep underground. The center point is where we are now, but it's very weak. It's so weak that even I can't sense it if it's not gathered together. Then I don't know. Lei shrugged. The little angel brought the two of them down at a slightly faster speed. However, for safety reasons, they did not suddenly descend to the bottom of the shaft. She looked around and looked at the flashy decorations on the walls of the shaft with interest. If this was really a passageway for storing energy, why would they use such complicated decorative patterns that looked fancy but had no practical use? However, these things did not seem to have any special use. There was no energy, and there were no signs of any special modification. Perhaps the Lost Clan was so bored that they would do these things in a shaft. At first, the walls of the shaft were still intact. However, as they got closer to the bottom, they saw some signs of damage. It was as if something had burst open the walls. Yin Nuoxing recognized the signs of damage and could not help but frown. The internal energy had burst open the walls of the shaft. This is the sign of an energy explosion. Isn't this just a normal passageway for storing energy? She frowned too. Maybe not. Yin Nuoxing looked around with a serious face. With his eyesight, he could easily see the walls of the shaft. He saw many holes that had been blasted open by the energy explosion. Under the exaggerated decorations, there was a layer of gray crystals that looked like glass. Those looked like energy crystals. Energy crystals without any energy. An entire shaft filled with energy crystals. She took a deep breath. This is not an energy passageway, right? According to this arrangement, this method. Why do I feel that this looks like something from your friend's side? That friend? Oh, now that you mention it, I remember. It looks like... Yin Nuoxing grinned. Navira's sighed. This can't be a huge energy weapon, right? Chapter 1228. Lining the walls of the shaft were some energy crystals that had already lost their energy. It was not hard to imagine that they were once filled with energy. Of course, a shaft that consumed such a large amount of energy could not simply be used to store energy. According to the structure, the shape, and the remaining weak energy at the bottom of the shaft, Yin Nuoxing felt that he could assert that this was a weapon, an energy cannon. Oh, it was not the kind of cannon that some ancient countries used. It was a weapon that condensed and compressed pure energy and then launched a focused attack. He heard Navila talking about it. Although he did not understand it very well, he thought that it was similar to a cannon. The only difference was that the cannonballs were replaced with endless pure energy. Perhaps it would hit a little further, and it would be more destructive. Moreover, it would make a lot of noise when it was hit, condensing all the pure energy together without any processing and firing it casually. It's all very low-level weapons. They're huge, cumbersome, and can't be moved. They're more like cannons mounted on fortresses, the kind that could be destroyed with a precise shot from afar. They're not very valuable. Buddy, if you're interested, I'll introduce a few weapons to you. Look at this one. It's used to strike with the concept of rules. It can dig out a piece of light from an entire world with a light press. Yeah, you don't like it? How about this one? It uses the power of the void as its core and several types of high-level energy as its power source. That's right, it's a sword. It's specially made for a human sword like you. Yeah, why is your face so dark? You don't like it. Calm down. Impulsiveness is the greatest sin of the gods. Calm down if you have something to say. Whoa. Thinking about it. Yin Nuoxing's face was full of black lines. He shook his head fiercely. Why do you think of that guy at this time? Speaking of which, he said that it was fine. Originally, he was taking him to visit his armory. As he looked at it, he introduced it with the tone of a profiteer, although he was not selling it to him, and he could casually take away a lot of it if he wanted. He did not know how to use those things. Looking at them, it was just strange. Yin Nuoxing's mind seemed to have drifted a little too far. He quickly got rid of those irrelevant thoughts. Anyway, he just wanted to express that he seemed to know the shaft that they were descending into. If he was not mistaken, it should be the huge and cumbersome long song cannon that was fixed on the fortress. Based on the structure, the furnishings, and especially the meaningless patterns on the walls of the shaft, he felt that there was an 80% chance that those meaningless patterns were actually similar to the patterns and charms on their magic circles. They looked gorgeous, and outsiders would not be able to understand them no matter how they looked at them. At this moment, he was standing here looking at other people's weapons. If he had never seen them before, he was just an outsider. In this way, the strange patterns and meaningless messages all over the lost ancient city could be understood. Those things might be similar to charms, concentrating the energy of the entire ancient city on this long song cannon. It was the opposite of Juguang City. Juguang City gathered the light and spread the energy throughout the entire city. The lost ancient city gathered all the energy in the center and then shot out. But this cannon was a little too big, wasn't it? Using a city spanning about 1,000 miles as the base, and a cannon with a width of more than 100 meters. Hiss! When it was shot out, it would be spectacular, gorgeous, and exciting, right? At this time, Yin Nuoxing suddenly understood what the art Navira had been emphasizing to him was. A world full of fireworks, a world full of explosions, a world full of... Wasn't it just setting off fireworks? He knew how to do that too. With a boom, he could set off the entire world as fireworks. That scene was so exciting that it felt like the beginning of the world. Oh, he digressed again. Why did he suddenly want to set off fireworks? Look at how beautiful this world is. The sky is full of stars. The starry sky is boundless. The moon is bright. The stars are sparse. And the scenery is beautiful. It is really a very good time to watch fireworks, or set off fireworks. Perhaps the big movements in his mind were too frightening, or perhaps it was because he hadn't organized a firework party for a long time. In short, his thoughts were revealed through his expression. He even succeeded in causing the temperature of the air to drop by a few degrees, causing Qing Lei and the little angel to shiver from the cold. What terrible things did you think of? One evil smile. She couldn't help but murmur. Her wings were shivering so much that they almost cramped. No, Yin Nuoxing grinned. Fireworks. Qing Lei was dumbfounded, but the little angel reacted. She was speechless. She hugged Hao Ren's hand and gently pinched his stomach. What the hell are you thinking? Why did you think of this? Rumble. A muffled sound came from the bottom of the well. Something seemed to have happened at the bottom of the well. The original sound could no longer be identified. The only thing that could be heard was the echo of it splashing against the wall of the well. After a long period of transmission, It turned into a strange and low muffled sound. It sounded like a storm where the wind was squeezing through the window and thunder was rumbling outside. These two sounds were a mixture of the two sounds. The sound originated from a very far place. When it reached Yin Nuashing and the other's ears, it was no longer the same as before. The rumbling sound was getting louder and louder, as if a brilliant explosion was rapidly approaching. And there was really a wave of air surging up from below, carrying the smell of hundreds of thousands of years of decay and stuffy heat. There was also a mouthful of dust, which choked the three of them and made them squint their eyes. The little angel quickly flapped her wings and imitated the holy light to disperse the dust blowing in their faces. Qing Lei had an allergic reaction and wanted to jump up. She subconsciously touched the knife, but when she thought of her current appearance, she obediently shrank back. She looked around nervously and could only see a small amount of old dust being blown up by a hot wind. Did you guys hear that? What does that sound? Yes. Well, as long as you are a normal person, you can hear it. Yin Nuashing nodded, looking at the movement and listening to the sound. Maybe something at the bottom of this long song cannon has collapsed. Maybe it is a wall or something else. The collapsed building has rolled up a gust of wind, and there's only one or two one-way passages, so the wind is gushing out. Oh, big sister, you are still thinking very fast. What is a long song cannon? Qing Lei nodded and was stunned. The three words sounded very unsettling. Yin Nuashing pointed downwards with her hand that was supporting her leg and said, "This is the shaft we are in. The walls of the shaft are filled with energy crystals that have lost their energy. According to the structure of the upper and lower parts of the shaft, there's an 80% chance that this is a pure energy weapon. If it could still be used, it could fire a cannon from the sky to the ground, and the land within a few thousand miles would be scorched." Qing Lei's face turned pale instantly. This thing, it can't be used anymore, right? Maybe it can't be used anymore. No, it has been covered in dust for so many years. It has been buried under the ice for hundreds of thousands of years. It can't be used anymore. Yin Nuashing wanted to ask Navilla to come over and fix it. Perhaps it could be used. Although he wasn't in this era, it didn't matter. Even if he rolled up his sleeves and pretended to be very good at arranging things, he could still pretend to make it work. However, when he saw the little girl's face that was as white as snow, he decided not to scare her. Qing Lei heaved a heavy sigh of relief. Just like that, the three of them continued to descend along with the dust wind. She muttered to herself for a moment and couldn't help but say, "Speaking of which, in the past, those lost ancient ruins and lost ancient cities all had a similar arrangement. In the center, or in a certain direction, there was a very large and seemingly very powerful object. Could it be that those were the same as the one we saw? Are they special objects?" Yin Nuashing nodded. According to the strange decorations engraved on the wall of this shaft, it is very similar to the decorations in the lost cities. If I'm not wrong, it is actually a kind of extraordinaire used to guide energy, store energy, or do something with energy. Spells, just like the spells engraved on scrolls. The energy channel used by Juguang City to guide the energy of the entire city. It is such a kind of existence. Oh, I understand. Qing Lei scratched her head. But big sister, can spells be engraved on scrolls? Yin Nuashing shrunk his neck. This time it was really bad. He wanted to talk about magic circles, charms, runes, and so on. But there was no such thing in this world. He could only make up some things that felt appropriate and tried his best to explain. In fact, he did not know if this world had the technology to engrave spells on scrolls. Just as he was racking his brains to think of a way to dodge the question, Qing Lei turned her head and saw his slightly troubled expression. She immediately filled in the blanks in her mind. I know. This must be a topic about extraordinaires that I don't know about. Teacher once said that it's difficult for ordinary people to guess the topics between extraordinaires because they speak in their common language, and other people can't understand them. Big sis, this must be what you're talking about. Yin Nuashing quivered. That's right. This is the ancient technology. Now, there are very few people who can do this. It is probably the ancient information passed down from ancient times. My part. Qing Lei nodded her head in realization. There is no end to this nonsense. The little angel sighed in her heart and shook her head grumpily. She flapped her wings and fell down as if she had lost her strength. Her speed was getting faster and faster. Just when Qing Lei felt that something was wrong, she flapped her wings again and hovered in the air again. At this moment, they had successfully reached the bottom of the shaft. At the bottom of the shaft, they thought that they would see more complicated runes and charms. But in fact, there were some strange mechanical devices at the bottom of the shaft that were accumulating dust. There were 3 rings, which became smaller and smaller from top to bottom. Behind the smallest ring was a ball-like object. Of course, they had stopped working. The snow and ice that were sealed by dust had melted into a puddle on the ground. The walls of the shaft were also wet. The ground at the bottom was also covered in a circle of patterns, and the parts closer to the bottom were more tattered. This was the big hole that Yin Nuoxing and the others saw on the walls of the shaft when they were descending. What was exposed inside the walls of the shaft were a lot of energy crystals that had lost their energy. And there was Yin Nuoxing raised his head. Right below him was a huge passageway. It was a horizontal passageway, like those crisscrossing water pipes. Suddenly, one of them was inserted horizontally into the shaft. It was a regular circular passageway, which was also more than 100 meters high. He looked at the passageway, then raised his head to look at the shaft. After a moment of silence, he imagined a huge energy beam shooting out from the horizontal passageway and then rushing towards the shaft. He was afraid that it would pierce through the shaft. As he thought about it, he noticed the weird thing with 1 sphere and 3 rings. This mechanical device occupied the entire bottom of the shaft and was tilted at an acute angle to the horizontal shaft and the shaft. It was probably like a mirror refracting light. The huge energy beam shot out from the horizontal shaft, hit the device with 1 sphere and 3 rings, and then refracted and rushed out of the shaft. The energy in the beam was constantly superimposed and compressed, becoming more and more destructive. The excessive energy caused the energy crystals in the shaft to riot, and some of them were ignited and detonated. It was probably a long-song cannon. But why did it have to make a bend in the ground? From here, we can probably see the energy source of this huge weapon. Such a huge fixed long-song cannon should have an energy source, Yin Nuoxing said, pointing to the horizontal shaft. Huh, the energy source. Isn't it the lost ancient city above? Qing Lei was stunned. She followed Hao Ren's gaze. It was dark underground, and she could not see her fingers in front of her. Only the light from the little angel could illuminate the surroundings, but it could not illuminate very far. However, she could still see a huge, round object in front of her. Yin Nuoxing thought for a moment and told her about the refraction of energy and light. This is probably the only possibility. Otherwise, there is no way to explain the function of the horizontal shaft and the sphere and 3 rings. Big sister knows a lot. Qing Lei sighed habitually. Then, she flicked her long hair. Are we going to go over like this? Or should we drag the big guy down with us? Before Yin Nuoxing could say anything, the little angel trembled violently and shook her head. We can't carry them. We can't carry them. The big guy is too heavy. There are a lot of people. Yin Nuoxing knew that she was being lazy, but she did not expose her. This time, it did not matter whether there were a lot of people or not. That's right. It's fine if there are 2 of us, but we can't carry more people. Qing Lei was silent for a moment and nodded. If that's the case, let's go ahead first. I'm also curious about where this place will lead us. After saying that, Qing Lei jumped down from Yin Nuoxing's arms. Her feet stepped on the dust and snow on the ground that had not completely dissipated. Then, she took the lead and walked towards the horizontal shaft at the bottom of the shaft. Yin Nuoxing and the little angel looked at each other and shrugged helplessly. Then, they followed behind her unhurriedly. There was an invisible barrier at the cross-section between the shaft and the horizontal shaft. It might be used to prevent energy from flowing backward. However, that small barrier was not a problem for Yin Nuoxing at all. When Qing Lei was about to reach the cross-section, he took a few steps forward and bumped into it with his face. He smashed a huge hole in the fragile barrier with his head. The whole process was done quietly. No one would know what happened if no one said anything. Qing Lei only saw that he suddenly took 2 steps faster and then stumbled forward, as if his feet had brushed against something. She did not feel anything unusual at all. By the way, is this barrier still working? The little angel knew what he was doing. She could not help but say in his mind, I thought everything had fallen into eternal slumber. To be specific, that's right. But do you remember what I said just now? There's still residual energy gathered at the bottom of the shaft. It's probably the last time it was used, and the residual energy was deposited at the bottom of the shaft. Then it was stored through those things that look like charms, runes, and energy crystals. At the same time, it's also used for the barrier function. This thing's energy consumption is very low. According to the scale of this weapon, it's actually not difficult for a little bit of residual energy to keep it hanging for hundreds of thousands of years, Yin Nuoxing replied. After entering the horizontal shaft, what he saw was still the same thing. There were fancy runes and runes. In terms of scale, this was probably the largest weapon he had ever seen other than the one for Navira. After knowing the purpose of those runes, it was not difficult to distinguish and analyze them. Yin Nuoxing deduced for a while, and deduced that the energy gathered by this huge weapon was more exaggerated than the radius of a few thousand miles that he had just mentioned. The energy that burst out from the shaft and went through the top half of the tower for a second, or even a few times, the energy that burst out was comparable to the power of a post-divine. However, when he thought about how powerful the life forms in the last quarter might be, this was not surprising. The entire shaft and horizontal shaft did not have a fork or a small door for people to enter. This made Yin Nuoxing even more convinced that this was a huge weapon. When it was last used, it must have gathered more energy than it could bear. Otherwise, there would not be such a huge crack on the wall of the shaft. Especially since those cracks were from the inside, there were no signs of second damage. Therefore, it might have been over after one overload explosion. After that, it might not be used anymore, or it might have been buried under the ground by the avalanche. Speaking of which, what was the Lost Clan thinking? Why did they set up such a huge cannon next to the snowy mountain? They were probably worried that the cannon would not collapse the mountain. Just by the size of this big thing, one could tell that it would cause a huge commotion when it was used. The 3 of them were not slow at all. Soon, they had covered a long distance. However, their path was blocked by a pile of rubble. The huge rubble penetrated the ceiling of the horizontal shaft and fell down. They could see the part of the ceiling where the rubble was connected to the soil. Looking at this part, Qing Lei felt a headache coming on. She had a feeling that a secret was about to be revealed, but was being held back. If they moved this pile of rubble away, it might cause a second collapse. Besides, they could not move such a huge pile of rubble. Boom! Then, Yin Nuoxing smashed all the rubble in front of her into powder with a slap. She even froze the ceiling. Her actions were so smooth that Qing Lei's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. This is the first time I've seen someone act so recklessly. She could not help but complain. Even if she was an extraordinaire, this was probably beyond the scope of an extraordinaire. Looking at the whole world, there was no extraordinaire who could withstand the psychological pressure to do such a thing. Calm down, calm down. There's no need to be agitated. The little angel smiled and waved her hand. It's just a normal operation. You haven't seen it yet when he acts more recklessly. Well, it's child's play to scare you so much that you're spitting your tongue out. Of course, there was nothing that a guy who could sacrifice the realm of the gods and blow it up could not do. The collapsed rubble disappeared, and there was still a horizontal well behind them. However, it was a little different now. With the ceiling that was now frozen as the dividing line, many rays of light could be seen swimming in the passage on the other side of the ice block. They were like small golden lightning bolts that kept jumping. Those golden lightning bolts came from all directions, from all kinds of wounds of various sizes. There were also weak energy remnants. These should be part of the weak energy that Yin Nuo planet had sensed earlier and gathered together. Ugh, we can't go through here. Qing Lei was depressed when she saw the large and small golden lightning bolts. Exposed to this level of energy, even an extraordinaire would not be able to withstand it for long. The amount of residual energy is too much. She shook her head helplessly. Big sister, even you can't do anything about it. Let's see if there's any other way around here. Wait a minute, don't tell me you're thinking of going straight through. Ugh. Before she could finish her sentence, she saw Yun Nuoxing and the little angel walking past as if they did not see anything. Every time they walked a distance, the jumping golden lightning bolts would dim, as if the energy was being sucked away. Qing Lei was speechless. This time, she could not help but be shocked. Even the ancient information passed down could not explain this. Now that she thought about it, the act of digging out the lost ancient city was enough to scare all the scholars to death. She was just overwhelmed by the discovery of this epic tier item and did not pay attention for a while. Now that she thought about it, she had a nagging feeling that she had missed out on something terrifying. In any case, the thing that she had just thought of was something that could not be accomplished even if hundreds of extraordinaires were to gather their powers. She could not help but gulp at the thought of it. Big sister, are you really just an extraordinaire? Yun Nuoxing stopped and looked back with a bewitching smile. What do you think? Anyway, they were just passers-by. If they did not gain anything from this trip, they could only retreat. He did not care what the life in this world thought of him. He shook his head. Don't worry. You'll be fine as long as you follow us. That's not what I meant. Forget it. It's useless to say so much. Anyway, I don't know much about extraordinaires. Maybe there really are extraordinaires in this world who have this kind of power. Qing Lei sighed and said the first half of the sentence. The second half of the sentence was just muttered in her heart. After she finished speaking, she waved her hand and said, All right, anyway, I'll go with big sister. Hee, don't drag me into the pit. Yun Nuoxing and the little angel looked at each other and shrugged. It's nothing. Chapter 1229. Walking in a place full of chaotic and expired energy was a very exciting thing. She did not know if the golden lightning around her would suddenly go berserk, or if it would suddenly explode with some kind of destructive power and hit her head or something. She only saw Yun Nuoxing and the little angel walking in this somewhat dilapidated passage, strolling leisurely. As the two of them approached, the flashing golden lightning around them constantly extinguished, as if the flames had encountered a constantly spreading cold air and gradually extinguished. As for herself, she did not have such good self-control. After all, walking in this place looked abnormally dangerous. Her heart was about to break through the limit, and her rapid breathing made her nose and chest feel a little stuffy and numb. She looked around nervously, and her footsteps were almost imprinted on the place Yun Nuoxing and the others had walked, for fear that a small wrong step would cause some kind of energy explosion. She nervously wiped the sweat on her forehead. A few meters away, the golden lightning suddenly crackled, scaring Qing Lei half out of her wits. She hurriedly moved closer to Yun Nuoxing and the others. You don't have to be so nervous. Yun Nuoxing stopped and looked back at the little girl who was so frightened that she almost threw herself on his back. He shook his head helplessly and stretched out his hand to grab her arm without any explanation. As he walked forward, he said, If you are really worried, try to stay as close to us as possible. Beside us is the safest place. This sentence made Qing Lei feel a little safer. The person walking in front of her did give her a sense of security, especially when she thought about what he had done in the past 1 or 2 hours. If she ignored the many illogical and unreasonable phenomena, the scene was not only strange but also very reassuring. It was as if a powerful bodyguard who could overturn the whole world suddenly appeared beside her. The structure of the shaft at the bottom was basically the same as the horizontal shaft. There were runes and charms all over the shaft wall that were used to guide energy, and there were energy crystals hidden under the shaft wall. The only difference was the ladder. The energy crystals here were not grayish-white and lusterless. Instead, they contained energy in a faint golden color. The wall made of energy crystals was also damaged in some places because the wall had existed for too long and aged. It could no longer restrain the energy and caused a small explosion inside the wall. There were some small holes in the shaft wall that could be seen now. The energy that had not been blown up in one go was leaking out from those holes, forming golden energy lightning. The longest lightning bolt was a little more than a meter, and the shortest one was only the length of a finger. However, even this little bit of energy was enough to seriously injure an ordinary person. This was also the reason why Qing Lei walked in fear. Perhaps in her opinion, this dark tunnel with flashing golden lightning was similar to the road to hell. To be fair, no normal person would walk into such a tunnel filled with dangerous energy. If they did not understand the relationship between the two, they would only think it was a fluke. After a short walk, they would shudder and run for their lives. Qing Lei did not know how the golden lightning formed and why it disappeared. She only felt that it might have something to do with the two in front of her. Originally, as an experienced explorer, she should not continue to walk on such an unreasonable thing as normal. However, the two did give her a sense of security and indirectly gave her a lot of courage. Only then did she muster up the courage to follow them deeper. Qing Lei had a strange feeling in her heart. This might be a rare opportunity. If she timidly suggested to turn back now, they might really turn back. But then, she might miss something. Anyway, she braced herself and followed them down. When she passed through a gap in the shaft wall, she glanced inside and saw that the energy crystals below were still glowing with a faint golden color, flowing slowly like water. This was a sign that the energy had not disappeared. In other words, it was not that the energy had disappeared, but the golden lightning had disappeared into thin air. Perhaps it was suppressed by something. If we keep walking along here, where do you think we will end up? Yin Nuoxing suddenly said. Her voice echoed faintly in the hollow well, and Qing Lei came back to her senses. She subconsciously looked up at the sky, but she could not help but smile bitterly. Underground, the sun, the moon, and the stars were indistinguishable. When she was pulled down, she was only concerned with screaming. She could not tell the direction at all, and did not know which direction they were going. I don't know. It's too hard to tell the direction underground. But I won't be surprised where we end up. Yin Nuoxing thought for a moment and identified the direction. He would not get lost just because they were underground. At this moment, he was constantly releasing his soul to the surroundings. He could clearly identify where they were at the moment. Now, they should be heading towards the center of the snow-capped mountains. Thinking of this, he could not help but show a strange smile. If we go to the heart of the snow-capped mountains like this, Qing Lei seriously thought about the situation and said, I think I will pass out. The heart of the snow-capped mountains, huh? Yin Nuoxing suddenly said in a lazy and strange tone. Since ancient times, there have been so many legends, so many generations of life, including the powerful life of the previous generation. How could no one have explored the details of that place? Qing Lei was stunned for a moment. She lowered her head and thought for a moment. Then she said, maybe we didn't encounter a good opportunity. When the legends were passed down, it was already called the Sacred Mountain. Generations of people came here as if they were on a pilgrimage, but they did not mention that it was a sacred place that could not be set foot in. They even left a detailed map, but only the center was blurred out. Such ingenuity, so deliberate, really makes people wonder if they actually know something. For example, they know what exists in the center of the snow-capped mountains. It's just that it can't be passed down, so they hid it. Yin Nuoxing's footsteps slowed down slightly. He looked at the surrounding walls of the well and said, think about it. Look at this huge horizontal well. It was once a weapon of war. The damage was caused by energy overload. It must have been used before, maybe more than once or twice. It was left behind by the Lost Clan and buried deep under the snow-capped mountains. How could they not know the details of the snow-capped mountains? Or did they actually know something and deliberately built this huge weapon in the snow-capped mountains? Tilting his head to look at Qing Lei, who was deep in thought, Yin Nuoxing stopped talking. He was just bored out of his mind. Walking in this place, he was going to fall asleep if he did not say something. Besides, he still had something to say. According to Qing Lei, almost every ancient city had the same layout. Could it be that every buried ancient city was a huge weapon? Weapons that were spread all over the world, but there were no traces of war at all. There were no huge scars. Even the scars and traces caused by the natural activities of the world itself did not exist. How should he put it? It was a little too beautiful and too monotonous. On a planet, there are hundreds of different species. The living environment that they need exists perfectly on this planet. The big clans have the largest living space, and the small clans live in seclusion in every corner. Even if they leave those environments for a short period of time, they will not be affected at all. The most incredible thing is that they coexist so peacefully. The last generation of life had built so many weapons, but there is no trace of war to be found. Yin Nuoxing said to the little angel in his soul, "Don't you think that the coexistence of these few phenomena is a little too fake?" It immediately continued his words. Even the world created by the great deity of origins is so huge and so miraculous. It is filled with countless battles. Wars big and small have never stopped. Even if there is a ruler on the surface, the small fights have never decreased. This unrestrained world, without a unified ideology, is actually so peaceful. You told me that this is a world that is filled with the flames of war and scars of war everywhere. But now that the war has ended and there is no more war, I can understand why so many weapons of war were left behind. The little angel looked at him and said, "Have you ever seen a world in a state similar to this planet in the void?" Yes, it has existed, but it is the kind where all the species are unified. There is only one species in an entire world. Either their ideology and the big goal are unified, or there's an indestructible belief, and it is the kind that is unified. Yin Nuoxing nodded. It is because of the differences between life forms that there is conflict. When there is a stronger unity in some aspects, or when there is a strong constraint, there will naturally not be that kind of chaos. But this planet does not. No. Yin Nuoxing sighed deeply. On one side, it is a world full of vitality and infinite beauty. On the other side, it is an ancient civilization that hides countless gigantic weapons. You see, it is too fake. Hearing his thoughtful tone, the little angel felt that something was not right. I keep feeling that you're talking to someone. Yin Nuoxing raised his head and laughed. I'm talking to you. We are communicating through our souls. Is there anyone else who can hear us? I don't know. I keep feeling that you are strange. After saying this, he felt that something was not right. He shook his head. No, you have always been strange. You have never been normal. Yin Nuoxing paused and rolled his eyes. Just as he was about to argue with it about what it meant by weird all the time, Qing Lei suddenly grabbed his hand and jumped up. Ah, big sister, look in front. Yin Nuoxing and the little angel raised their heads together. The horizontal well seemed to have reached the end. There was light in front of them. It was a light curtain. They could not see what was behind it, only the existence of light. Obviously, they would reach a place after passing through the light curtain. Perhaps it was a place connected to the gigantic weapon, or perhaps the surrounding walls of the well looked quite new. They were dim and had been covered by dust for countless years. There was nothing in the empty horizontal well except for a huge light curtain. There seemed to be no other choice but to step into it. Qing Lei jumped in front of the light curtain and tried to go around to the side. However, the light curtain blocked the entire horizontal well. Perhaps they could only jump forward to find out what would happen. Yin Nuoxing and the little angel also came closer. They looked at the light curtain that suddenly appeared with interest. Beside them, a female explorer asked worriedly, "Big sister, can we still go through here?" Yin Nuoxing shrugged. "What else can we do?" Qing Lei was obviously stunned. She was a little hesitant. It seemed that she had never encountered such a situation before. She did not know what to do at the moment. What will happen if we go through here? Well, Yin Nuoxing raised her head and looked at the light curtain that was 100 meters high. She pondered for a while. Who knows? Maybe we will still be in the horizontal well after we go through here. Or maybe we will go to some strange place. Maybe we will be thrown into the dying Black Sea. Qing Lei's body suddenly stiffened. Yin Nuoxing tilted her head and saw her frightened expression. She could not help but let out a sinister smile. Then, she quickly hid it. She felt that she had scared enough. She coughed dryly. Ahem, don't worry. I was just scaring you. This might just be a teleportation light curtain. According to the function of the horizontal well and the vertical well, we might not be able to go far. Just follow us. Then, without saying a word, he dragged Qing Lei towards the light curtain. Qing Lei seemed to have accepted her fate. She was dragged towards the light curtain step by step. Then, she plunged into the world of light. The dazzling light made her close her eyes tightly. A faint cold wind blew on her face. She was very familiar with the unique cold air of the snow. Qing Lei's eyes widened. Her vision was a little dim. The dim light of the Vesuvius could not shine into the snowy mountain, but it had successfully illuminated the dark clouds. Through this limited vision, she could see the dark clouds that covered the entire snowy region. She was in a cave. Her position was a little high, so she could see higher places. The mountain walls were grayish-yellow. Only the entrance of the cave had accumulated snow. It seemed that there had not been a strong wind recently. Two figures stood side by side at the entrance of the cave, their long hair swaying gently with a weak cold wind. Qing Lei carefully looked at the cave. Then, she turned back and looked into the depths of the cave. There was no horizontal well behind her. It was just a sealed cave. She stood at the innermost part of the cave. When she reached out her hand to touch the cold mountain walls, her slender fingers were stained with some grayish-yellow color. She was a little stunned. She had never experienced something as magical as teleportation. She could not get used to it for a while. Fortunately, the psychological quality of an explorer was quite high. She went to some strange places every day. She was mentally prepared to encounter strange things one day. At this moment, she quickly put this bizarre thing behind her and treated it as reality. Then, she slowly walked towards the entrance of the cave and walked towards the two people. She heard light footsteps behind her. She felt a little nervous and forced herself to calm down. Yin Nuoxing did not turn her head. Oh, you're back to your senses? I'm still a little confused. Qing Lei smiled bitterly. She slowly moved behind Yin Nuoxing. Where are we now? In the snowy mountain. It's a teleportation light screen. It seems that we're quite lucky. It sent us to this place. But this place, well, you can see for yourself. Yin Nuoxing and the little angel took a step to the side so that Qing Lei, who was slowly walking forward, could see the scenery in front of her. Then, she froze on the spot and turned into a stone statue. In front of her was a snowy mountain that was so white that it was almost transparent. The three of them were standing on a snowy mountain. They were only a dozen meters away from the top of the mountain. There was a small opening in the snowy mountain. It was the cave that they were in at this moment. In front of them, there was a snowy plain. The mountain that they were on was actually one of a row of continuous mountain ranges. It was like a natural wall that separated the front from the back. By the way, this snowy mountain was really quite high. Looking at the foot of the mountain, one could not tell how high it was. The connection with the previous space has been completely cut off. The little angel whispered in her soul, "We can't find out where we are. We can't find the right place. This place is like an isolation zone. We can't even sense the void. But our power is still there. So we were thrown into a box." Yin Nuoxing put her hands together as if she was putting something in between her hands. Although I expected this, I didn't expect it to happen so soon. Expected? What expected? She was slightly stunned. You knew in advance that we would be thrown here? No. There's no way to predict this. Yin Nuoxing shook her head. After all, this is someone else's game. We're just contestants. I just knew that something would happen, but I didn't know what it would be. Yin Nuoxing tilted her head and looked at the confused little angel. She shook her head. That's what I mean. If you can't understand, then what can I do? Can you not make it sound so weird? I'm getting goosebumps. She shivered and dropped 2 feathers. Then, she calmed down and said, Then what's the situation now? What should we do? I don't know. Let's go and see. Yin Nuoxing blew on her palms. Well, She liked this action very much, although she didn't feel cold. She looked at Qinglei. She was still a little stunned. Her eyes were straight, blank, and helpless. What's wrong? You're standing still like an ice sculpture. Have you been here before? No. Qinglei came back to her senses. Her eyes were trembling. But there's only one place in the whole snow-capped mountains that I haven't been to. The heart of the snow-capped mountains. Yin Nuoxing raised her eyebrows. Now it was even more fun. In 3 years, we've gone around most of the snow-capped mountains. Even if we haven't been there personally, we can recognize some places from the corners. Qinglei nodded in a daze. But I can't help but feel that there's something familiar about this snow-capped land. Could it be a problem with the angle? She asked softly. Although there is such a problem, it won't be too big of an impact. We can recognize what we should. Those places that are too dangerous to go to might have a lot of dead beasts. But in order to avoid getting lost in the snow, we can still recognize those places even if we don't go. Qinglei turned her head to the side and looked at the snow-capped mountains. I've never seen such a mountain range in the snow-capped mountains. It's endless and so magnificent. If it exists, it should be a very obvious road sign, so there's an 80% chance that this is the so-called heart of the snow-capped mountains. Yin Nuoxing turned his head and whispered to the little angel. By the way, I've lost all sense of the realm of the gods and the void. I'm an observer. No matter how far away I am, I can instinctively sense the realm of the gods. I know that it still exists and stands in the void. When I first entered this world, I couldn't find the direction, but I know that it still exists. Now, I even suspect that the realm of the gods has been blown up. Yin Nuoxing looked at the blurry, snow-capped mountains in the distance. Of course, according to the characteristics of the realm of the gods, I think that something has blocked my connection with it, or even cut it off. Logically speaking, other than me, the realm of the gods can't be blown up. It was speechless. Then now, it was a little worried. This place made even a strange life form like it feel a little uneasy. This uneasiness even made it look behind it. There was no way out. Obviously, no matter where they went before, there was only an empty cave behind them. Why don't we walk around first? I don't know what this heart of the snow-capped mountains is, but there's no point in standing here. Qinglei couldn't help but say when she saw the two people standing there in a daze, looking at each other without saying anything for a long time. After saying that, she walked out of the cave full of energy. It was as if the shock and surprise just now had disappeared and turned into motivation. Wait a minute. Before she could step out of the cave, Yin Nuoxing pulled her back with one hand. The courage she had just mustered almost disappeared completely. She asked nervously, What's wrong? Yin Nuoxing shook his head and took a deep breath. They had been standing in the vicinity of the cave and didn't step out. Now, I'll take a few steps first. If there's anything I can react to, you might not be able to handle it. Because they were in the heart of the snow-capped mountains, Qinglei, who knew the mystery and strangeness of this place, didn't say anything else. She swallowed her saliva and stared at Yin Nuoxing with her eyes wide open. Although Yin Nuoxing said it casually, he had already imagined what might happen. Then he slowly lifted his foot and took the first half step out. Little by little, his foot was close to the edge of the snow line. The next step was to leave the range of the cave. He forced himself to be alert and carefully lifted his foot. Slowly, bit by bit, he stretched it out. After he crossed the snow line that was close to the cave, a cold and strange feeling suddenly spread throughout his body. It was as if he was in an endless void in an instant. Chapter 1230. The Dark Void. That was nonsense. In this life, he had been in the void for many generations. The time he spent in the void was hundreds of times longer than the total time of billions of people on a planet who stayed at home for their entire lives. He could not be more familiar with this place. He could still remember everything clearly. He remembered everything. He remembered that he had just put half of his foot out of the cave. Then everything happened so abruptly. The world froze. Everything stopped. However, his mind continued to move forward. He could still feel himself. It was as if time had stopped, and he was independent of time. Time was just a quantifier created by the life in the great Yuan realm for the natural activities of the Sea of Time. It was used to observe and restrain something. In fact, time was meaningless to the void. The void was nothing to the Sea of Time. Both of them were essential elements of the world. Although the Sea of Time was located under the void, they did not interfere with each other. They existed together and would never die. Just like the life in the world had its own timeline and gave time a meaning, the existence of the Sea of Time also had its own meaning. Time. His perception of time had become a little blurry. The time he had experienced had become a vague interval number. He had accumulated countless years and wandered in the void where time was blurred. He shuttled through the layers of rules and wandered in the Sea of Time. He was like a faint ray of light that quietly wandered through any place. When he passed through the gaps of time, the Sea of Time produced a small countercurrent. To him, time was the easiest and most intimate thing to sense. The aura of time that settled on him could even crush a part of the void. Therefore, there was no need to ask how far away this instant of eternity was, because even he did not know. In that instant, he seemed to have seen the scene of everything in the world turning into ashes and then being reborn from the ashes. Time seemed to be flowing in reverse. Everything flowed back to the beginning of everything, back to the time when nothing existed. Then everything was released. Pooh! The sound of his feet stepping on the snow was exceptionally crisp, and the gray and stagnant world started to move again. Just as he said, everything was released, and everything started to function normally again. The only thing that was not right was that he was still living in this dream and could not wake up. But actually, there was no need to investigate that. For a moment, he had an idea to treat those memories as a dream. Now that he was living in reality, there was no problem. Because this dream would last for a very, very long time, he could not put too much of his emotions and thoughts into the dream. If he were to wake up one day, then he would combine the two into reality. But now was not the time to talk about those things. In that instant of stagnation and release, in the eyes of Qing Lei and the other girl, Yin Nuoxing had only leisurely stretched out her foot. Then, she staggered a little abnormally and quickly returned to normal. Everything was as before, as if nothing had happened. They also did not know what that stagger meant. Well, it seems that there is no problem. Yin Nuoxing turned around and gave the two girls a thumbs up. Then, she waved her hand and pointed down the mountain. Anyway, let's go down and take a look first. Qing Lei let out a long breath. As she walked out of the cave, she said, "Big sister is always scaring people. How could there be anything strange?" Yin Nuoxing quietly watched her walk out of the cave safely. Then, he tilted his head and looked at a certain little angel, who followed her footsteps and floated out of the cave. She stood beside him and looked at him, tilting her head. Yin Nuoxing smiled. Her somewhat cold hands reached into the pockets of her windbreaker. Step by step, she walked towards the plains under the snow mountain. Qing Lei and the little angel followed behind her unhurriedly. "You seem to be a little strange." The little angel floated a little faster and came to stand beside him. She looked straight into his eyes with her golden eyes. A moment is eternity. What happened in that moment? You are stumped. Yin Nuoxing grinned. How would I know what happened in that moment? Then, as expected, the unnatural pause just now was like the discomfort released from the long time stop. She sniffed. The aura of time on you has become much stronger. You won't be swallowed by the Sea of Time, will you? Who knows? Yin Nuoxing shrugged, as if nothing had happened. His soul had carried too much time and existed beyond the time limit set by the rules of the void. If there was such a limit, the shackles he broke through should be an irreparable hole. However, in fact, the void did not have such a boring limit. There was no limit on how long a life could live, and there was no limit on how long a soul could live. People whose lifespans were determined by fate. Oh, it was referring to mortals. Mortals would embark on special paths due to various coincidences and various circumstances. They would break free from the shackles at that moment. In fact, it was almost the same concept. If there is a day when the aura I carry becomes a rope and drags me into the sea of time, I will sink without any buoyancy until I am dragged to the bottom of the sea. At that time, I will merge into that sea and become the spokesperson of time. I will wander between the gaps of the world and silently watch everything happen. I will no longer be able to participate in anything. As Yin Nuashing spoke, she tilted her head and smiled at it, shaking her head. It is just a speculation from a long time ago. Oh, here, it is referring to the time of the quarter moon. It is like an old man who has lived for too long and is mumbling about something that will never happen. You were about to disappear in time just now, and you can still say such things so calmly. She shook her head helplessly. It seems that I am worried about you for nothing. Seeing that Yin Nuashing did not care and smile without any worry, the little angel sighed and decided not to discuss those topics with him in the future. Now, although I don't know what you have experienced that made you smile even more strangely, so what happened just now? Well, do you know what is in the snow mountain? Yin Nuashing raised his head, which was a habit of his when he was thinking. It was as if by looking at the sky, he would not be restrained by any thoughts and perspectives. He would not be limited by any thoughts and perspectives, and he would be stuck in a small view. What is it? I can't say. I only have an immature guess. It is not about this snow mountain, and I don't know what it is about. It may be related to this world, or it may not be. Anyway, it should be related to the creation of the world. The little angel was slightly stunned. It's that simple. There was a helpless smile on Yin Nuashing's face, and he shook his head. The creation of the world of a world was a small matter. For them, it was just another world of light being born in the vast and endless void. There was nothing special about it, and it was not worth their attention, but the creation of the world that I am talking about is not the birth of a small world of light, nor is it the rebirth of the void. It is the moment of origin. Its expression trembled, and even its wings stopped flapping. There was a subtle change in its expression. Was that the moment of origin, the moment when the great Yuan realm was born? Time flowed backwards, and all tangible and intangible things were being retracted, flowing backwards towards the original point of origin. The void returned to zero, and everything ceased to exist. In an instant, everything was released. Yin Nuashing said calmly, "That was the scene that I saw." So, you think that what happened here, what is about to happen, will be related to the scene when the great Yuan realm was first born? If it is not fooling around with me, then that should be the truth. It seemed to understand what he was talking about. Maybe it was the world itself, or maybe it was something in the world. According to him, they had already attracted its attention when they came to the world, and then all of this happened right under its nose. That was it. Therefore, he was looking forward, he was waiting for it to do something. Maybe what was happening now was just an appetizer, just the beginning, or maybe everything had come to an end, and it was time to retract the net, and it was time to witness all of this happening. Rumble. The sound was like an earthquake, and in this snowfield, it was as if millions of tons of ice and snow were rushing down from a height of several thousand meters. The dull sound suddenly rumbled in this snowfield, like a thunder that had not been heard for millions of years in the dark clouds in the sky, and it constantly attacked Xing Lei's nerves. As for Yin Nuashing and Yin Nuashing, they were also stunned at first, but they were not worried at all. They were just witnessing the sudden internal collapse of the towering snow mountain in the distance with their own eyes. The entire snow mountain collapsed like a landslide, and this small scene was nothing. Compared to this, Yin Nuashing still felt that the whole sun was facing. Oh wait, he was wrong. He still felt that the scene of an entire planet crashing into the sun was more impactful. As long as one was not blind, even an illiterate person could become a philosopher who could see the void with a single glance, or a poet who sang and praised life. If he was not blind and had not been burned to ashes, he would have a chance. However, there was someone present who obviously did not think so. When Xing Lei saw the towering snow mountain about 2,000 to 3,000 meters away collapse like it had been blown up, her eyes almost popped out of their sockets. especially when she saw the avalanche caused by the collapse of the snow mountain. She was so frightened that she screamed and subconsciously pulled Yin Nuashing to run back. Avalanche! Run! She had wandered around the snow-capped mountains for more than 3 years and had seen many large and small avalanches. If one thought that the distance of 2 to 3,000 meters was very safe, well, most people who had such thoughts would have been buried under the snow and become ice sculptures. Don't be afraid, it's just a small scene. You're so calm. Hey, you're so strong, girl. Yin Nuashing calmly put his hands in his pockets and was about to act cool, but he was pulled by Qing Lei and staggered. This careless girl was an explorer after all. She walked in those strange places all year round and had to deal with a lot of things. At the very least, she had a lot of strength. If he did not speak, he would probably be dragged back like this. Yin Nuashing shrugged his shoulders, and with a wave of his hand, he grabbed this girl by the waist and carried her up under his armpit. Then, he walked towards a place where the snow mountain had collapsed and the earth was trembling. Qing Lei's face was filled with tears as she looked at the white line from afar. Her face was filled with ice and snow. Woo-woo. Big sister, I haven't finished writing my will yet. Why don't you wait for me to draft my will first? It hurts. Yin Nuashing hit this girl who had obviously forgotten something. He shook his head helplessly and said, "Don't worry, it's just a small scene. If you turn back now, all your previous efforts will be wasted." Qing Lei calmed down immediately. She tried hard to raise her head and looked at Yin Nuashing's calm and beautiful face. Then, she tilted her head and looked at the little angel, who did not seem to feel the power of nature at all. Only then did she remember that the two of them were also so calm in the horizontal well just now. It was as if nothing would cause the two of them to panic at all. She rolled her eyes and suddenly showed a sly smile. "Big sister, you said before that those creatures from the previous season must have known something. Then they felt at ease to build those things under the snow mountain. In my opinion, Big sister actually knows something, right?" Yin Nuashing was stunned. He thought about it seriously and then shook his head seriously. "You don't say. I really don't know what's under the snow mountain." Qing Lei's smiling face froze. "Not only don't know, we haven't studied the snow mountain. In fact, it was an accident that we met you that day. Before that, whether to go to the snow-capped mountains or not was just a topic that had not been decided," he said with a sigh. Qing Lei's face that had just recovered became pale again. But after a moment, she threw away those emotions and looked puzzled. "Big sister, why did you come to the snow-capped mountains?" "Come to do what?" Yin Nuashing and the little angel looked at each other. Both of them scratched their heads. They really did not know what they were going to do. It was just that this was a place that could not be explored at all. Incidentally, it was also the place that attracted the most attention in this world. So, they decided to sneak over to take a look. Of course, their plan was still a plan at that time. Coincidentally, they bumped into a group of adventurers. Qing Lei's face was ashen. Qing Lei's face was ashen. Her heart was in pain. "We were going to investigate something, just like you were looking for the traces of the creatures from the previous season in the snow-capped mountains. You can think of us as having similar goals, but our goals are more vague and abstract because we don't know what we were looking for. Goals are goals. First, we have to look for it. Maybe we will find it if we look for it." Looking at how calm Yin Nuashing and the little angel were, especially when the avalanche swooped down, Qing Lei suddenly felt that extraordinaries were indeed extraordinaries. Just look at their temperament and attitude. Could they consider that there was a mortal beside them? If they were to crash into the avalanche like that, they would be scared to death. They were really going to crash into the avalanche. Qing Lei could already see the avalanche swooping down on the wilderness like a tsunami. The difference was that this was a tsunami that occurred on the snowy plains. The white waves were roaring and getting closer and closer to them. At this time, it was too late to turn around and run. If she was not being held by someone, she would have written her will immediately, hoping that someone would come here thousands of years later to dig her out. "Big sister, how do you think I will look better when I'm frozen into an ice sculpture?" Qing Lei reached out and tugged at Yin Nuashing's clothes. "Yin Nuashing, huh? As expected, it's better to look more peaceful. After all, this is for people thousands of years later to see. If you look hideous or in too much pain when you're dug out, it will definitely be very scary, right? The little angel was stunned and immediately understood what the little girl was thinking. Yin was 2 seconds slower, but he also reacted. With an amused expression on his face, he couldn't help but chuckle. He bent his finger and flicked the forehead of the little explorer who had begun to think about how to die peacefully. Why are you flicking me again? Qing Lei covered her forehead and lowered her head as she muttered. Don't worry, you won't die. Yin shook her head in annoyance. The scenes we've seen are far beyond your imagination. It's just a little avalanche. Of course, from your point of view, it might be very scary, but to us, it doesn't make a difference if a snow mountain collapses or half a continent collapses. It's a difference that we don't have to pay attention to, she added. Qing Lei's eyes were twinkling like stars. She had an expression that said, although I don't know what you are talking about, I feel that you are very powerful. However, this mortal body of mine, write my will first. She was conflicted. The feeling of the shaking intensified a lot, and the roar echoed in the entire snowfield. On both sides of the path that the two people and the guy who was being carried were moving forward, the snowfield suddenly burst open with a roar. Countless ice and snow poured down the cracks, like two rifts in a glacier, revealing the hidden scene in the depths of the glacier to everyone. The two rifts were still widening and spreading into the distance. At the same time, the huge avalanche that swooped down in front of the three people suddenly seemed to be blocked in front of it. It immediately split into two snow waves and fell into the rifts on both sides, like the scene of the sea pouring into the cracks in the earth. Seeing the snow waves that were about to bury them alive being separated by such an incredible situation and falling into the rifts that suddenly appeared below, Qing Lei could not help but pull Yin sleeve and said, Big sister, although I know that you are an ice curse master, and it's a little exaggerated, but you're going through too much trouble to deal with an avalanche, aren't you? Yin was still talking to the little angel about what happened. When he heard this, he could not help but be stunned. He could not help but jump up and down. I really didn't do this. It's separated by itself. Qing Lei looked at him as if he was a liar, which made Yin not know whether to laugh or cry. It seemed that what he did before was too unobservable. After all, what he did with energy was like something that happened naturally to mortals who could not observe the flow of energy. Looking at what he did before, and then looking at what he did now, it was no wonder that Qing Lei did not believe that they did not do anything. But in fact, they really did not do anything. This show, this avalanche, this rift, was a show arranged by someone else. They were just quietly walking on the snowfield. However, he really did not expect this scene. Now he was even more confused about what would happen. After all, he was already prepared to deal with the avalanche. Now, he did not even have to do anything. In the collapsed snow mountain, something gradually revealed itself. It was something that was hidden under the snow mountain, a familiar grayish-blue color. A grayish-blue building that seemed to be the tip of a tower gradually revealed itself, along with the collapse of the snow mountain. It was a tower-like building, but it only had the appearance of a tower. The interior should be empty. It did not seem to have an interior structure. It was like a tower of parts pieced together by a large number of parts. Other than a little symmetry and a sense of structure, it was impossible to tell what it was for. It was divided into two parts. One was the circle of 8 spikes at the top, and the other was the base that was embedded in the collapsed snow mountain. The upper part was suspended about a few hundred meters away from the base. It was a behemoth that was hidden in the snow mountain. Perhaps it had always existed here and was cast into a snow mountain by the ice and snow that never melted all year round. But no matter what the reason was, it had now become something that was open to them, as if it was following the flow of a certain plot. The host has already prepared to entertain the guests. Yin put Qing Lei down and tidied up her clothes. Whether it's a Hongmin banquet or not, we have to go. Otherwise, wouldn't it be a waste of a scene that we spent so much time setting up? The little angel shrugged. You have the final say. Qing Lei looked left and right, scratching her head in confusion. I always feel that you have known something long ago. I was the only one who was kept in the dark. No, no, really. The two people waved their hands repeatedly. Yin Nuoxing smiled. But aren't we going to find out now? Chapter 12:31. Hidden under the 10,000-year-old ice and snow was an ancient and magnificent tower. Its actual size was magnified a lot when one got closer. The top half of the tower was engraved with 8 spikes, looking like an upside-down jellyfish. The base below was arranged in rings, and one could clearly see that some parts of the rings were engraved with the same gorgeous decorations, which seemed to be charms and runes. When the ice and snow had completely fallen off, the ground of the snowfield had sunk a little. The towering snowy mountain had disappeared, leaving only a ground full of snow and large pieces of broken ice. Qinglei stood in front of the base of the giant tower, looking up at the behemoth with her mouth agape. Her face was full of indescribable shock. Judging from the color and style, this should be something from the Lost Clan, but what is this? I have never seen this model before, and there is no record of this type at all. Qinglei could not suppress the shock in her heart and said, from many records, she estimated that she had seen as many as 20 types of lost ruins. The shaft she saw today was not a new type discovered. It had appeared before, and there were many more. If it was really a weapon like her big sister said, it was probably a fairly basic weapon. It was powerful, simple, and convenient to make. As for the one in front of her, it was the first time she had seen it, and it did not have a huge city or other ancillary buildings beside it. It stood alone in the world of ice and snow. Big sister, lost ruins have never appeared alone. At the very least, there would be several buildings, one main building and several ancillary buildings. Can you see if there is anything else around here? Qinglei pulled Yin Nuoxing's sleeve and said. Hearing that, Yin Nuoxing nodded. His spirit spread out, and in an instant, it spread to the end of this sealed world and went hundreds of meters deep into the snowy ground. In the end, he unexpectedly found that this sealed space was a perfect sphere, just like the area covered by an energy barrier. No, just this one. According to what you said, lost ruins appear in groups. Then this one in front of us might be one of the more special ones, perhaps. Qinglei murmured and nodded. She started to walk around the base of this huge tower. As she walked, she pondered and casually said, I thought I would see something when I came out of that horizontal well. What? For example, some large space used to store energy or something. Qinglei deliberated over her words. I didn't expect to come to such a strange place and see an even stranger lost ruin. Before I saw this, the whole world thought that lost ruins were all in groups. Who would have thought that I would see a lost ruin with only one building today? Yin Nuoxing chuckled. There's something to brag about again. No, forget it. Qinglei argued and shook her head helplessly. She said, Big sister, what do you think this strange tower is used for? Yin Nuoxing also tilted his head to look at the base of this grayish-blue tower and fell into deep thought. To be honest, he really couldn't recognize these things. Among the people he knew, probably only Navila could recognize what these things were used for at a glance. If it was him, it would be difficult for him to tell the use of this strange building with just a glance. Although he had learned about it, it was only a shallow understanding. Moreover, this building didn't emit any energy reaction. As long as there was a little energy fluctuation, he could determine what this building was used for through the form of the energy fluctuation. It's hard to say. I don't know, Yin Nuoxing admitted. But if we look up from below, we can't see anything. Why don't we go up and take a look? Look, there's a staircase. Yin Nuoxing pointed to the front. The tower was a structure of overlapping rings. The base was also stacked into 3 layers. The connection between each layer was thinner. The overall appearance of the tower was cylindrical. The grayish-blue surface was engraved with gorgeous and exquisite patterns. Those patterns were used to guide and store energy. In the 4 directions of the round tower, there were 4 steep stairs. It was as if 4 grooves were dug to place the stairs. There was no way to go inside. Just like what he felt at first glance, there was no internal space in the upper half or the lower half of the tower. It was like a sculpture carved out of a huge iron lump. There was no way to go inside without digging a passage. Even if you went inside, you would not see anything. Do we go up? Qinglei looked at the 1-meter-wide staircase and frowned hesitantly. The strange scene just now was still flashing in front of her eyes. Yin Nuoxing and the little angel tried their best to deny that it was caused by them. She also chose to believe that it could only be caused by this thing or something even stranger. She believed that it was related to this tower. Now, they had to go up this strange building, don't worry. Yin Nuoxing saw the worry on the little girl's face. She knew that she had encountered enough strange things today. It was enough to overturn her understanding of many things. For a while, she did not dare to act rashly. She smiled and patted her shoulder. No matter what happens, it won't be a problem for us. You won't be in danger if you follow us. Qinglei raised her head and looked at Yin Nuoxing's beautiful, smiling face. She frowned slightly and smiled. Anyway, it seems like we don't have a way out. Well, let's just believe in Big Sister. No matter what happens, I won't regret this trip to the Snow Mountain. Yin Nuoxing smiled and nodded. She looked at the little angel, and the two of them walked towards the staircase that was forcibly cut out from the wall. Qinglei followed closely behind. The three of them stepped on the grayish-blue staircase together. The sound of their footsteps sounded like they were stepping on bamboo and stone. It doesn't sound like metal. Maybe it's a special material from this world. Yin Nuoxing said softly in her soul as she stepped on the grayish-blue staircase. If that's true, then this material is already extinct, she replied in her soul. What's wrong? I've taken a look. There's nothing similar to or similar to this grayish-blue material on this planet. She paused for a moment and said, Of course, we can't rule out the possibility that the previous life form had completely mined this material. Maybe there are still some places where this material is hidden, but I haven't found it yet. Yin Nuoxing looked at her and pondered for a moment. She then looked at Qinglei and said, Qinglei, do you know what these grayish-blue buildings, the lost ruins, are made of? Qinglei was stunned for a moment. She did not expect him to bring up such a seemingly unrelated topic. She was stunned for a second before she fell into deep thought. She knew, but she still had to think carefully for a while. This is something called a material that can be found all over the continent. However, it was during the ancient times. During the origin of this season, that material was almost exhausted. What was left of it could not be used for anything, so it was protected. This is also one of the reasons why the Lost Clan is related to the previous or the origin of this season. Many scholars have speculated that there was a period of time where the continent must have had a lot of these grayish-blue materials. However, they were all mined by the Lost Clan. This building material has excellent properties of storing and guiding energy. If that's the case, Big Sister, it's not impossible for it to be a weapon. Perhaps it's because of this condition that I agree with your theory. Oh, I see. That's understandable. Yin Nuoxing nodded. The base of the tower was more than 100 meters tall. The entire staircase led to the top of the base. When passing through the three relatively thin floors, one could walk along the gap between the upper and lower floors to other parts of the base. Little Angel walked around the top of the tower with some interest. She thought that she would find a hidden entrance, but unfortunately, it was a solid building. There was no internal space at all. Little Angel also realized this as she walked around. She walked around the other side of the staircase for a while before returning to the middle floor. The three of them climbed the tower for more than 10 minutes. Yin Nuoxing and Little Angel were mainly concerned about Qinglei. They did not climb all the way to the top in one go. The steep staircase required them to lift their knees. There were also more than 1,000 steps. Even though Qinglei had been walking around some strange places all year round and had a lot of stamina, she could not withstand such torment. As soon as they reached the top floor, a gust of cold air from the high altitude brushed against their faces. Qinglei's clothes were already soaked through. Yin Nuoxing raised her head and stood at the top of the base. She looked up at the inverted octopus above her. She could clearly see the texture on the octopus and the 8 spires. The round part that pointed downwards had a circular opening in the middle. Looking at the opening, she could see nothing. However, It looked like the dome of an inverted circular building. Through the circular opening, she could see the grayish-blue building inside. It was solid without a doubt. As for the top floor of the base, there did not seem to be anything particularly noteworthy. There was a smooth platform on the top, and its surface was translucent like a mirror. She could see the bottom of the platform about a foot deep. It was transparent, like an iceberg. It was engraved with a lot of gorgeous and complicated patterns. That was it. It was a solid lump at the center. There's nothing. Qinglei sat on the top of the stairs and panted for a while. After resting for a while, she leisurely followed Yin Nuoxing and Little Angel to the middle of the platform at the top of the tower. She looked around. There was nothing. However, she could see the direction they came from. There was an endless row of snowy mountains. The cave it just came out of was still in the center of this row of mountains. But it's really incredible. Qinglei put her palm in front of her forehead and looked at the cave in the distance. We came out of that cave. After passing through the horizontal well, we thought we would see more buildings. However, we came to a seemingly unrelated snowfield. Well, we can't see the back of the row of mountains from here. We don't know if this is the hinterland of the snowy mountains. It doesn't matter if this is the hinterland of the snowy mountains. In short, there are secrets that ordinary people can't find. Yin Nuoxing squatted down and looked at the top of the platform. He said, "Look here." Qinglei swung her long hair and slipped over. She leaned into Yin Nuoxing's arms and watched him look at the center of the platform. Below the ice surface, there was a ring. There were 3 chains connected to the edge of the ring. The other end of the chains was inside the ice surface and connected to the edge of the tower. Is there something?" Qinglei looked up in confusion. Yin Nuoxing lowered his head. Their faces were only 1 or 2 inches apart. He looked at her face and squatted down a little more. He pointed at the ring embedded under the ice surface and said, "Look inside. There are flickering spots of light around it. It's very, very dark. You can only see it when you open your eyes." I see it." Qinglei opened her eyes and noticed the spots of light he was talking about. It was like looking at a city in the night sky from the edge of a distant mountain range. The lights shone in the night sky, flickering with attractive and warm light, making people want to go home. What's wrong with these spots of light? Although she saw them, she didn't understand why he was pointing at them. There's a weak energy remaining, Yin Nuoxing said softly. He stood up and pointed at the upside-down jellyfish above. He pointed at the circular opening in the middle, which looked like a crack in the dome. These 2 positions correspond to each other. It's a bit like some kind of transmission device in my memory, but it's very different. It's just that these 2 points are the same. If I'm not wrong, those spots of light might be a destination or something. Through this, maybe we can... Before he finished speaking, Qinglei exclaimed when she heard that it was a transmission device. She wanted to stand up in a hurry, but she staggered and lost her balance. She pressed her palm directly on the ice surface. At the position where her palm was on the ice surface, a dim spot of light suddenly lit up. "Transmission." Yin Nuoxing finished his words. Then he felt something and lowered his head quickly. He saw that Qinglei might have accidentally triggered something. He couldn't help but be stunned. Where did you press?" "Well, I... Qinglei jumped up with a cry. When she saw the spot of light under the ice surface lit up, her face turned pale. At this moment, the little angel, who was wandering around, also felt the movement. He quickly came over and asked, "What's wrong?" As soon as he said that, the space between the dome crack in the middle of the upside-down jellyfish and the ice surface under their feet lit up. Then, the 3 chains under the ice surface also lit up. The dim patterns that had been silent for many years also lit up. More and more grayish-blue lights appeared in the air. The grayish-blue lights seemed to have turned into thin needles hanging down from above. Then, the 3 chains and the rings slowly rotated with a series of cracking sounds like breaking ice. A few seconds later, the whole platform flashed and the 3 people disappeared. The ring and the chain slowed down, and the grayish-blue lights in the space also disappeared. In the cold and gloomy space, the world seemed to be forever shrouded in darkness. There was no light. It was cold and dead. There was no warmth and no life. It was so cold that people felt that their blood would freeze in their veins. The sky was dark. Nothing existed. It was empty and empty. There was no obstruction in sight. As long as one's eyesight was good enough, they might be able to see something extremely far away in this dark place. When they looked around, an extremely huge object occupied their entire sight and the entire sky. Then, a light suddenly appeared on a short mountain in this dark world, causing the surrounding soil and sand to float off the ground. Realm of order. Following a crisp sound, a transparent energy barrier enveloped the light that appeared. The power of order and the power of rules changed the situation within the energy barrier. After that, the light slowly appeared and threw the three of them onto the short mountain that was shrouded in darkness and disappeared. Yin Nuoxing and the little angel landed steadily on their feet. Qing lay staggered and quickly grabbed Yin Nuoxing's arm to prevent herself from falling off the short mountain. When she came back to her senses, she quickly looked around. When she saw the dark and silent space, she couldn't help but widen her eyes. Wow, where is this? Yin Nuoxing looked around. As if she sensed something, she slowly turned around. Then, her cheeks twitched slightly. Hidden in the darkness, across the black mountain in front of her, she saw a huge object. The edges of the sphere were covered in yellow and red, making it look like a huge cake. It was the satellite of Wei Su. If that was the case, based on this position, this angle, and this reality, they could only be in the shadow continent near the satellite. The continent that was still being torn apart by the satellite in front of them. Seeing that the two people didn't say anything, Qing Lei was also stunned. She slowly turned her head in the direction they were looking at. Then, she saw a shocking scene that she would never forget in her life. She also deduced their current location from this scene. Her face, which had not recovered from the shock, suddenly became so pale that it could be seen clearly in this shadow world. That big sister, did I get into trouble? Qing Lei's face was sad. Her mind was filled with extremely complicated thoughts. It was so complicated that a lot of thoughts were spinning around. The words, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, kept repeating in her mind. Yin Nuoxing still calmly put his hands in his pockets. Well, in terms of results, it's not really a disaster. But in terms of behavior, there's no doubt that you've caused a huge disaster. But I'm also a person who only cares about results. At least for now, it's still peaceful. All right, I forgot to say, welcome to the Shadow Continent. You've gone much further than your teacher. He just glanced at you from afar across the starry sky, but you've come here directly. Qing Lei almost fainted. Her face was full of shock, and there was no joy in it. Yin Nuoxing and the little angel didn't immediately explore this destroyed continent. They didn't even release their souls. They just sat here with Qing Lei. Looking at the little girl's frightened look, they couldn't help but look at each other and shake their heads. They usually encountered situations that were more thrilling and more incredible than this, but they could still deal with it calmly. But for the little girl, this was undoubtedly a super development, and it was a bit too much. She would never have thought that 10 minutes ago, she was in a world of ice and snow. 10 minutes later, she came to a dark, sunless, and even colder world. If it weren't for the support of the order barrier, she might have turned into a popsicle on the spot or exploded on the spot. Have you calmed down? Yin Nuoxing stretched out her finger and poked the back of the little girl's head and said softly, Well, a little. Qing Lei took a deep breath and calmed down a little. At least her hands were no longer trembling. She felt that if she had experienced all this herself, she might have been scared out of her wits by now. Fortunately, there were two incredible sisters beside her. She saw that the two of them were not surprised or even worried. She couldn't help but say, Big sisters, aren't you nervous? We were suddenly thrown to such a far place. We might not be able to go back. Well, Yin Nuoxing raised her head and said lightly, Wei Su's satellite will approach the continent to a limit every night. The shadow continent will be a little closer, so we can still go back. Qing Lei, the little angel, rolled her eyes at her. If they wanted to go back, they could go back now. Why did they have to follow such a big red and yellow blob across the star field at an unimaginable speed. They were now on the Shadow Continent, which was hidden in the shadow of Wei-Su's satellite. Wei-Su's satellite. They were rushing back to Wei-Su's side at full speed, strolling around and visiting that continent in the middle of the night. To put it simply, they were now following the Shadow Continent and Wei-Su's satellite to the remnant sun. And if their calculations were correct, they would be able to see the remnant sun in 2 hours. It was really exciting just thinking about it. Qinglei saw that the two of them not only weren't nervous, but also seemed to be looking forward to something. Suddenly, she became even more nervous. She could casually figure out what was happening now, but because she knew, she became even more nervous. Big sisters, why aren't you nervous? We're rushing to Wei-Su now. The light of that star will burn us to death. Qinglei became even more afraid as she thought about it. What's there to be nervous about? Yin Nuoxing and the little angel looked at each other, and the two of them sighed in unison. We're used to these kinds of things. Qinglei thought about it and decided that it was better to faint. Chapter 12:32. In the dark and boundless starry skies, a colossal object was flying across the planetary system at a speed that defied all laws and common sense. That tremendous speed should have torn apart, but what was sucked in by its great gravitational pull and covered by its shadow was a shattered continent. The two maintained an extremely close distance, balancing and steadily rushing towards the brightest region ahead. As it got closer and closer to the remains of the sun, the storm in the colossal planet also became extremely hot, even glowing faintly as if it was about to combust. It was daytime on the Shadow Continent. The sky was slightly brighter, like the first light of dawn. The light from the companion star drove out the darkness of the dark continent, allowing Yin Nuoxing and the others to see the appearance of the continent clearly. It was pitch black, as if the earth had been scorched. Black and gray alternated, and it was covered with strange patterns like the appearance of molten volcanic magma after it cooled and stabilized. This was evidence that the land had once melted, proving that it was not forever shrouded in shadow. This was good news, but also bad news. Of course, this was nothing to the two of them. However, the little girl beside them could not calm down. Her face was full of sweat, and she could not calm down. She sat on a flat rock with her legs bent, but it was as if the rock had nails on it. No matter how hard she sat, she could not sit steadily and comfortably. I'm going to die. I'm going to die. I'm going to die. It's getting hot. It's getting hot. I'll be burned to charcoal. Yeah, I don't want to die in such a strange place. Yin Nuoxing had been listening to such nagging for a long time. They had been here for an hour, and even the little angel could not stand her nagging and walked to the side. A few minutes later, Yin Nuoxing could not stand Qinglei's nagging. She shook her head helplessly, patted her shoulder, and said, "Okay, stop nagging. It's really going to be fine. As long as you don't leave this barrier, even if you rush to the center of Tai, Wei-Su, you won't be burned to death. Just trust us." Qinglei raised her head to look at Yin Nuoxing's incomparably serious expression and calmed down a little. Just as Yin Nuoxing was about to heave a sigh of relief, her little face collapsed again. But that's a star, it's light. If we were to pass by it, how could it be fine? How could it be fine? No matter how ridiculous Big Sister is, in short, just trust us. Yin Nuoxing patted her head, shook her head, and said, "It's not good for you to stay here all the time. It's rare that we're here. We're here earlier than we planned, so we have to investigate carefully. If you're afraid, don't walk out of this barrier. I guarantee with the lives of the entire continent that nothing will happen to you." Qinglei was stunned. While she was in a daze, Yin Nuoxing and the little angel had already walked to the edge of the barrier. She stared blankly and waited for another 2 seconds before she hurriedly jumped up. "Wait for me. Wait a minute. Don't leave me here alone." Yin Nuoxing were a little confused when they turned around and saw the girl who seemed to be scared out of her was rushing towards them. Yin Nuoxing couldn't help but ask, "Aren't you scared?" Yes. but I'm more scared that you'll leave me alone in this strange place filled with black fog. Qing Lei wiped her sweat and said with a pitiful look. Yin Nuoxing glanced at her, then turned to look at the little angel. The latter shrugged at him, so he said softly, "Whatever, but don't run around. As you said, we're in a very dangerous place. You'll only be safe by our side. Don't go too far or else." Yin Nuoxing held back the second half of his sentence, but Qing Lei forced a silly smile. "I know, Big Sister won't be able to save me when the time comes, right?" No. He wanted to say that he would have to explain to her about resurrection when the time comes. Logically speaking, she was just a mortal. Even if she suddenly died in front of him, he could just grab her soul that had not yet dissipated and casually reconstruct a body. Moreover, it would be reconstructed with his divine power, which would be countless times stronger than the previous body. Even if her soul was scattered, there would still be traces of soul imprints and life imprints. He could bring them to the lowest level of the concept of laws, connect to the world core of this world, and reconstruct her again. That's right. Anyway, that's what I mean. Just don't leave our range. In fact, it's very safe. Yin Nuoxing nodded, but after thinking about it, he decided not to scare the little girl. Okay, I know. Qing Lei nodded and moved closer, her little hand reaching out to Yin Nuoxing's arm and said, "Big Sister, can you let me use your hand for a while?" Her hand was still trembling. Despite being comforted and told countless times that it was very safe, she still felt uneasy. Before seeing the truth, she could not calm down, and her heart was always worried about that moment. Yin Nuoxing could not do anything about it. After all, anyone who was suddenly thrown into this place and knew what was going to happen next would feel uneasy. Just showing a faint sense of uneasiness and nervousness was the greatest restraint. If it was someone with a weaker mentality, they might have already chosen to commit suicide. Look, the mountain next to them was also quite tall. It did not seem like the time to discuss this. This was a land full of black, and the mountains in the distance were faintly gray. Yin Nuoxing and the others slid down a gentle slope from mountain. In front of them was a wilderness with gentle terrain and gravel all over. The gravity here was also quite low. In fact, this broken continent still had gravity, and it was already a miracle that it was not attracted by the companion star next to it. Perhaps it was because this shadow continent was very big, about 1/3 the size of its companion star, much bigger than the planet Qing Lei and the others were on. They walked quite a distance away from the companion star and climbed up a rather tall hill. Standing at the top of the hill, they could see the upper half of the giant companion star in the sky. The pitch-black starry sky was slightly hazy. This was caused by it absorbing and reflecting the light of Wei Su. If it got closer, it would also become very bright. So spectacular. Even though she was here and knew what she was facing at this moment, Qing Lei could not help but praise. Standing here and looking at the huge planet in front of her, watching the red and yellow storm roaring across the entire planet, she could not help but gulp. Such a magnificent scene, such a magnificent scene. It was actually worth it to spend a lifetime here to see it. Think about it. Countless people in her world could only watch Wei Su's satellite rumble across the sky from a very far distance in the night sky. But she was standing here as if she could touch it. She could also clearly see the changes of those patterns. It's really so beautiful. Yin Nuoxing felt that the grip on her arm loosened a little. She could not help but tilt her head to look at her. Relaxed a little. Yeah. Qing Lei suddenly became a little indifferent and carefree. It was the kind of indifference that made her feel at home. To be able to see such a scene with my own eyes. Actually, my life is not in vain. I can already can your head. Yin Nuoxing fiercely rolled her eyes. I have already said it many times. I will say it again now. You will not die. This is just child's play to us. If you want to see that Wei Su up close, we can let you see as much as you want. Qing Lei blinked her eyes and suddenly smiled slyly. Big Sister has said it many times. It seems like you really are not lying to me. When have I ever lied to you? Big Sister, are you a god? Qing Lei's faint laughter made Yin Nuoxing and the little angel feel their hearts skip a beat. Then, they heard her continue. I feel that using ancient information or something like that can no longer explain it, because all of this has exceeded all of my knowledge. Even the life of the previous generation would not have such an exaggerated performance. So, you thought of what your teacher said about the so-called God? Yin Nuashing's expression was indescribable for a moment. Do you know what a god is? I don't know. I have said these 3 words many times today. I don't know anything, big sister. Qing Lei smiled foolishly. Don't you think that that kind of thing is just an imaginary existence, because it is impossible to explain it with human strength? Yin Nuashing teased and crossed her arms. Because you can't control it, you can't understand it at all. After thinking hard, you can't come up with anything. It is an omnipotent thing that your teacher calls a god. Qing Lei just smiled and did not continue this topic. Yin Nuashing also did not say more. Anyway, there was nothing to care about. What they had done today had long exceeded the scope of what mortals could understand. It was actually nothing for Qing Lei to think so. The sky was slightly brighter. Previously, it was like the morning sun, but now it was like the morning sun in the sky. Yin Nuashing could feel that an extremely hot object was approaching them at an extremely fast speed. They were rapidly colliding with that object. There was still some time before the scheduled trip around the sun. Taking advantage of the fact that this shadow continent had not returned to its melted state, they had to look for it carefully. If there was something there, the 3 people stopped on this hill for a while and looked up at the huge sphere. They watched the huge red and yellow storm inside roll out extremely far away, so far that the lines on the surface of the planet had obvious changes. Only then did they walk further away. The destination was just an illusion. Whether there was anything on this dark shadow continent. No, even if there was something there, as long as they thought about its trajectory, they probably would not think that something that once existed could still be left behind. After walking for 4 to 5 miles, they could not find anything. As far as the eye could see, other than the black, solidified, scorched earth, there were only those strange grayish-white mountain ranges and cracks everywhere. These were scars caused by multiple strong earthquakes. Those grayish-white areas seemed to be places with lower temperatures. This dark continent had a more obvious dividing line. On the black side, there was a melted, scorched earth. After passing through a series of cracks, it transitioned to the grayish-white area, which was milder. Even though the large planet behind them had already released some light and heat, this grayish-white area was still milder. Yin Nuashing stood at the rift valley where the gray-white and black regions intersected. He turned to look at the huge planet behind him and was silent for a moment. He was very concerned about that planet because of the power of divine death. He could now clearly feel the energy of those planets from the stars. Indeed, it was a little similar to the elements of chaos and the abyssal death shroud. As the planet's overall temperature rose, the presence became a little more concentrated, but it was still lazy and did not have any destructive power to speak of. He had thought that there would be some special change. Ah, in front, over there, Qing Lei exclaimed softly, causing Yin Nuashing to turn his head. Under the hazy, starry sky, there was barely enough light now. Looking down from the mountain range that stood by the Rift Valley, they could see that there was something not quite normal in the distance. The shadow of the mountain range appeared a little different in the faint changes in their line of sight. The Fourth Order seemed to have found something. The shocking discovery made Qing Lei exclaim again, almost forgetting that they were still in a very dangerous situation. Big sister, let's go and take a look. Let's go take a look. Yin Nuashing nodded and pulled her. With a light leap, they easily crossed a large distance, crossing the Rift Valley and the mountain range. The little angel was a little faster than them. With a flap of her wings, her figure had already appeared in the strange shadow. What reflected in her golden eyes was a pile of rubble, a dilapidated ruin hidden in the rubble, with dilapidated fences and broken walls. Gravel and sand were everywhere. This was a huge ruin, accompanied by gravel and Rift Valley. 4 long, crooked rifts gathered around this ruin, cutting it into an isolated island. At the edge of the ruin and Rift Valley, there were fragments and traces of buildings. It could be inferred that when these rifts surrounded this ruin, they also took away part of the original body. The shadow continent, the broken dark continent, was full of desolation. The unknown fragments on the ground seemed to be telling something to someone, sorrowful and desolate. This place was particularly dark and quiet. Her gaze swept across the remaining building fragments. The little angel felt that there should have been a rather magnificent scene here, but now, no matter what had happened in the past, what was left was only a desolate scene. This was an isolated island of ruins that occupied a very wide area. It was an irregular pentagonal island. The few rifts divided it into dangerous buildings standing on top of stone towers. The rocks below had become thinner and thinner as the rift valley collapsed. It would collapse at any time. In the end, it would be completely buried under this dark continent and disappear completely. The last words of the ghosts of the past would also be sealed with the dust of history. How is it? What did you see? Yin Nuoxing pulled Qing Lei to the side of the little angel and asked casually. She also saw the huge ruins in front of her and couldn't help but frown. Ah, big sister, there really was life on this shadow continent, and it should be different from all the life we know. The architectural style is also different. Qing Lei suddenly forgot her faint fear and happily pulled Yin Nuoxing's hand and swung it back and forth. Yin Nuoxing pondered for a moment, but then frowned. How can you be sure? Don't forget that part of the architectural style on the continent comes from the Lost Clan. In the speculation you mentioned the day before yesterday, one of them said that this shadow continent was the origin of life on that continent. You said it yourself. Qing Lei's face stiffened, and she scratched her head awkwardly. Now that big sister said it like that, it seems to be true. Don't be in a hurry to come to a conclusion and make too many guesses. That will only mislead you. Yin Nuoxing shook her head helplessly. The dead ancient city had not welcomed guests for many years. At this moment, Yin Nuoxing and the other two people stepped lightly on the ground, and the rubble that covered the ground made a crunching sound. The sound did not spread very far, perhaps there was no sound at all, and it was only a little sound that was produced within the range of the order barrier. The three people casually walked into the ancient city, passing through a collapsed palace and buildings, and passing through a broken tower that was more than 10 meters high. This city was filled with a faint, desolate aura, as if there were countless souls hovering here. Any slight sound that was made was a faint whisper that was attached to Yin Nuoxing and the others' ears. It's completely different from the lost ruins. The layout and the decorations of the buildings, there are some traces that have not been completely obliterated. Big sister, look at this wall. Qing Lei pulled Yin Nuoxing to a wall that still had half of it left. He speculated that it might have been a magnificent building that was hundreds of meters tall that stood in front of them. Looking at the collapsed ruins, the waste stones, and the traces of decorations at the corners, he felt that it should have been a palace, a majestic palace. Immediately, he thought of the realm of the gods, and when the realm of the gods was mentioned, it would naturally be associated with the gods. In that case, Qing Lei's teacher had once mentioned the gods and the shadow continent. Could it be that it was actually not a joke? Your teacher might be a very, very mysterious guy. He suddenly said a sentence without rhyme or reason, causing Qing Lei to turn her head with a confused expression. Big sister, what did you just say? I said, your teacher might be a very powerful guy. Yin Nuoxing repeated it again. He knew that the continent had nothing to do with God. No god had appeared, and it had not been distorted or unconsciously changed by high divinity life forms. However, her teacher was suddenly involved in this aspect, which made people extremely suspicious of whether he actually knew something. Perhaps something had indeed fallen into the shadow continent, and then it was coincidentally discovered by the great explorer-scholar who had traveled all his life. In the end, he made such an inference. But Yin Nuoxing did not say anything. Instead, Yin Nuoxing repeated it again. This pentagonal island was very wide, but there were not many things that were actually useful left behind, or even none at all. This ancient city showed signs of being eroded by high temperature, and the walls had melted like a stone-like object after a liquid solidified. Given that the Shadow Continent was located in such an awkward position, Yin Nuashing had every reason to believe that even this gray-white area had definitely been directly illuminated by the sun, that is, the light of Wei Su. It did not evaporate completely at once, so maybe it was not directly illuminated by the sun or something. Well, to be serious, he felt that there should be something like a barrier here, but there was no energy now. But it shouldn't be that there was no energy just because they came here. Maybe it was the life that once existed here that made the building very sturdy. After walking 2 laps around the ancient ruins of the ancient city, Yin Nuashing and the others strolled slowly to the center of the city. This was a huge square that was empty. There were no buildings within a radius of 1,000 meters, only a huge square paved with curved stone bricks. Some parts of the square were even covered with holes. Looking at the remaining fragments in the square, Yin Nuashing felt that those holes might be where some huge pillars had been placed. Some pillars with a diameter of 5 meters might be related to this square. Then he saw a flat pattern engraved on the ground in the center of the square. His eyes immediately widened. Chapter 12:33. The picture engraved on the ground was vivid and lifelike. Yin Nuashing felt that it was very familiar. It was so familiar that he shuddered. The edges, the appearance, the thing, the little angel, looked at the huge object drawn on the ground. She blinked her eyes, but she didn't feel much. That is it seems to be an altar. Altar? She was stunned for a moment. Then, an idea flashed in her mind. A few days ago, they rushed into this strange and unpredictable place to look for an altar. In the end, they didn't find the altar. They even went to another world to play. Now, she suddenly saw the engraving of an altar in this dark shadow continent. No matter how she thought about it, she felt that something was wrong. She tilted her head and looked at Yin Nuashing. She saw that he was also shocked. Her guess was confirmed, but she still couldn't help but ask, "Is this the thing?" Yin Nuashing nodded gently. He had seen it once. It was a picture he saw from someone's memory dozens of years later. It was a mysterious altar swaying in the depths of the void. Every line was wrapped in a strange aura. It was the engraving he saw in front of him. He couldn't be wrong. He couldn't remember it wrong. "Big sister, this is the altar." Qing Lei suddenly grabbed Yin Nuashing's sleeve and jumped up excitedly. The gravity here was too small. She almost pulled Yin Nuashing out with her jump. The latter quickly changed the rules in the order barrier. Then, the two of them stabilized. What altar? Yin Nuashing saw that she seemed to know something. He couldn't help but be stunned. He quickly asked, "It's that." It seemed that seeing this thing had a big impact on her. Qing Lei opened her mouth and shouted for a long time. She was sweating and biting her tongue. She couldn't say what it was. Seeing that she was more anxious than him after jumping up and down for a long time, Yin Nuashing shook his head helplessly. He put his hands on her shoulders and sighed softly. "Stop. Don't worry. Come look into my eyes. Now, slowly relax. Relax. That's right. I'm not asking you to fall asleep. Ahem. Slow down. Calm down." Yin Nuashing induced her to calm down. The little angel crossed the order barrier and flew around in boredom. This huge, empty square seemed to be engraved with such a painting. Other than that, there was nothing else. As for the outside of the square, there was a circle of buildings that seemed to have been weathered. There were traces of weathering everywhere. This shadow continent must have once existed in a place with air. Otherwise, how could there be such traces? As for why it became like this, there were many answers. Maybe it was dug out, or maybe that place was blown up. This shadow continent was the only remaining fragment. Judging from the fragmented appearance of the shadow continent, it felt that this should be the answer. The fluorescent slender hand gently touched the grayish-white half of the wall, touching the broken cracks. With a gentle touch, a part of it shattered and floated in the surrounding space. It didn't fall down, only a slightly bigger piece fell to the ground. The origin altar? Yin Nuashing was stunned. Is this the legend of your world? Ahem, the legend of this season or the legend of the last season? The little angel seemed to have heard Qing Lei's words, especially the name. which made it very concerned. She quickly flapped her wings and flew back into the order barrier. You remember now? Qinglei nodded and said, It's a very old legend. For this world, many legends are very old. No matter how many legends there are, it's not surprising. Even if this legend came from the creation of the world, there were people who believed in it before the birth of the world. The people who said it didn't think about how they knew the scene before the creation of the world. Ahem, what I mean is the legend about the origin altar all came from a very, very old time. It's an ancient legend from the last season. It's ancient to them, not to us. The world where Qinglei and the others came from had an unimaginable number of legends. There were all kinds of legends, big and small. If you really asked someone to tell them, that person would be able to say it clearly and logically. Moreover, there weren't many versions. It was as if everyone agreed on one or a few legends that didn't deviate too much. The whole world knew about it, and it wouldn't be unknown just because of the distance. This origin altar was one of them, and it was only one version. It was passed down from the ancient era, and it was still widely known. It was so widely known that Qinglei didn't pay much attention to it. Even when she saw it, it took her a while to remember it. It was as if something had become something that everyone was familiar with. Although no one had seen the so-called origin altar, everyone seemed to be familiar with it and could even describe the appearance of the altar. A very, very long time ago, probably referring to the ancient era of the last season of life. This is also the reason why the teacher said that there might be a previous season of life before the last season of life. When the world was created, for some reason, the world itself had problems. Yin Nuoxing was speechless. Her cheeks couldn't help but twitch. What do you mean by this and that and that? I don't know either. Qinglei shrugged cutely. That's a very, very ancient thing. Even the language translation wasn't very smooth. We don't know much about the language of the previous season of life. As for the more ancient, oh yes, speaking of the more ancient, the legend of the origin altar refers to the ancient era of the previous season. They mentioned that they couldn't get the specific information because of the language barrier. The information that was passed down to the later generations were things that they understood with their own methods. In other words, Yin Nuoxing pinched her chin with her right hand and wrapped her left hand around her right arm. For the people of the previous season, the origin altar that was passed down from an even more ancient era did not belong to them. It came from an even stranger place or time. Therefore, the people of the previous season speculated that the previous season of life was related to the previous season of life and linked it to the altar. Is that right? Yes, that's what it means. Qinglei nodded. After thinking for a while, she continued, Well, then, in the process of their research, they found that and that's a problem. The problem originated from the origin altar itself. Maybe they got something from the origin altar, or they learned some special information, but they couldn't decipher it or even understand it. They could only rigidly copy it, or even imprint the things that may or may not be words, and then pass it down from generation to generation. Speaking of this, Qinglei couldn't help but smile. Big Sister often sees some strange symbols on the buildings in Jiguang City. Not only explorers, but also some merchants who travel around, some ordinary people who travel far away, fishermen who go out to sea, small businessmen who open shops. They definitely have these things in their homes. It's just like some prayer symbols that have existed from ancient times until today. In fact, those symbols were passed down from that and that, but many of them were artificially changed. Because they didn't understand it at all, because they couldn't understand it at all. Last season, when they found more ancient information, they could only copy it down. Whether it was useful or not, whether it referred to something or not, they just drew it down, stroke by stroke, unchanged. The that and that I said were just transliterations. Of course, as time passed, the correct pronunciation of the transliteration may have changed, so even the words that it referred to became these few words. Yin Nuoxing suddenly realized when he heard this. So the that and that she said were used to refer to the special name of the altar. He thought that she was struggling to say for a long time and couldn't twist the words into this shape. What do you think? It flew over and glanced at him, saying, Ancient times, even more ancient times. It's not easy to reverse the transliteration and symbols that have been changed, but we can't just stop here, can we? Yin Nuashing shook his head. He hadn't given up yet, so he said, Qing Lei, do you know those two sentences? If you know, Qing Lei smiled. Big sister, I said it's a well-known. Oh, this is a little exaggerated. Anyway, it's something that scholars and people with some knowledge know. You ahem. Anyway, I don't know about this. I'm the kind of guy who shuts the door and windows and doesn't care about what happens outside. Yin Nuashing blushed. Qing Lei looked at him with a smile and did not say anything. She nodded and squatted down on the grayish-white ground that was about to turn into sand. She used a small knife to carve one character after another, something that looked like a character. When she dropped the knife to carve the first complete character, Yin Nuashing's expression changed drastically. In fact, when he was halfway through writing, his breathing became slightly disordered. He recognized this character. Even when she was only halfway through writing, he could recognize it and guess it. Little Angel also opened his eyes wide in shock. Those were words from the mythological era. It couldn't be wrong. It couldn't be wrong. Yin Nuashing was also in a state of shock. He couldn't be wrong. If the memories that Yin Nuashing inherited were flawed and wrong, then the owner of those memories, he couldn't be wrong. Yin Nuashing and Yin Nuashing looked at each other. Then, they nervously moved closer and watched as Qing Lei wrote the words one by one. When a line of words appeared, the two's breathing quickened. It was indeed the words of the kamikaze era, but this thing can't be read. Yin Nuashing couldn't help but say, it's like a child who just started learning how to speak and write. Runes from the mythological era were written correctly. Yes, they were written neatly. They could even recognize each word, but they could not connect the words together. In short, I can understand every word you say, but when you put all the words together, I don't know what you're talking about. Little Angel said concisely. Yin Nuashing smiled bitterly from the bottom of his heart. He really knew every word, but he couldn't say the words out loud. Each word existed by itself, and he couldn't understand what it was trying to say. As Qing Lei wrote diligently and seriously, Yin Nuashing noticed a small detail. When she was about to finish washing a word, she would quickly stop writing when she was about to stop. Then, she would use her thumb to rub off a little bit, as if she was adjusting or changing it. Then, she would start writing the next word. Qing Lei, you deliberately erased a word from a word. Why? Yin Nuashing couldn't help but ask. Qing Lei stopped and shrugged helplessly. Because I can't write it out, big sister. It's said that these words are cursed. They're words and languages that are bound by some powerful rules. No matter how it is spoken or written, the world will respond accordingly. It's said that there was once a person who didn't listen to the advice and was struck to death by a bolt of lightning. When the words of the gods exist, they will take effect immediately. Yin Nuashing and Little Angel were not surprised by this characteristic, because if it was really the words of the gods, as long as it was the words of the gods, it would have the effect of law. Even at their level, as long as they said it in their hearts, it would take effect. If it was more special. Anyway, anything was possible. But the two people looked at each other and then lowered their heads at the same time to look at Qing Lei, who was seriously writing there. A wave of sadness and confusion surged in their hearts at the same time. But would such a strange sentence really have any effect? If it really had an effect, it would be too powerful. These words were like a dozen words that were extracted from some sentences. Even if they were mixed up and reorganized, it wouldn't be useful information. Could this thing trigger the words of the gods? Oh no! Qing Lei suddenly screamed loudly. She finished the last stroke of one of the characters in her hand. At that moment, it was like spring had come to 1,000 trees, and the ice and snow had welcomed the sun. The beginning of something was being born. The one who felt it the most directly was Yin Nuashing. He directly felt that in a distant place in the starry sky, there was suddenly a huge distortion force that could turn the world upside down. It was so huge that it could tear this star field apart. It was nothing to him, but there were other people here. If they tried to stop or resist it, the resulting energy shockwaves might shock Qing Lei to death. then the only result would be carrying her and running away. He was just about to put it into action when the crazy and distorted force disappeared completely in an instant. It was as if it had just appeared to say hello. It was so fast that he almost collapsed. He turned to look at the instigator of what had just happened. He saw that Qing Lei was so excited that she slapped the last character engraved on the ground and scattered most of it. Only then did the strange energy suddenly disappear. In fact, Yin Nuoxing felt that the energy actually disappeared because the character had disappeared. It could not find a place to aim at, so it had no choice but to disappear. Phew, that was close. Fortunately, I was fast enough to erase it. Speaking of which, I am in the starry sky. I don't think I will be struck by lightning. Why are you so worried? Qing Lei shook her head helplessly and buried her head in the ground again. Yin Nuoxing and the little angel looked at each other and could not help but smile bitterly. If it were not for the fact that the little girl did not have divine power or the power of a god, the half-completed sentence just now would have directly followed the rules and blasted here. According to what he sensed just now, Yin Nuoxing estimated that the energy should have destroyed this star system tens of millions of times. Although he did not know what the sentence meant, from this point of view, it might be related to attack, destruction, or something else. Maybe he only saw half of it. Well, I'm done. But every character has been erased by me a little bit. There won't be a problem this time. After Qing Lei finished writing, she threw away the broken tile she found in her hand, stood up, and laughed with her chest out. She seemed to have forgotten the current situation. Yin Nuoxing and the little angel went over to take a look. After reading it, they shook their heads. It was still not working. They could not understand the meaning of these two sentences at all. They had a feeling that was called, I know every word when it is taken apart, but I don't know what it means when it is put together. The two people had such a feeling at this time. They looked at the words that they could distinguish one by one, but they were confused and did not know what it was saying at all. Who knew what kind of message that ancient altar left behind? Qing Lei, are you sure it's these words? Yin Nuoxing could not help but laugh dryly. Yes, it's like this. Qing Lei nodded. When she saw that Yin Nuoxing and the people were a little embarrassed, she could not help but laugh evilly. She used her elbow to poke Yin Nuoxing's arm and said, You can't understand it, right? You can't understand it, right? Because we can't understand it. This thing has been left aside. For thousands of years, it was just a legend that almost everyone knew, but no one really tried to understand it because nothing could be found. She paused for a moment and laughed dryly. Of course, it's also possible that someone actually tried to study it, but was struck to death by lightning. Being a scholar is actually a high-risk profession. No one will know if you die unknowingly. If you let your corpse lie in every corner, you might have gone crazy and died. Or you might have been played to death by yourself, she said with a look of regret, as if she had already seen those guys who died while playing with the language of the gods. Yin Nuoxing and the people were dumbfounded. But it did not matter. As long as they went against their conscience, they could say that they did not care about the information. It was not that they did not discover anything. At least they could tell that this mysterious altar of nothingness, this mysterious altar of origin, was related to the mythological era. This thing was not simple. Oh, this was nonsense. How many things related to the mythological era were simple? Then what should we do now? It asked softly. Yin Nuoxing frowned and looked at Qing Lei, who was still looking at the runes he had carved with great interest. He said, Qing Lei, do you know where this altar is? I don't know. No one has seen it before. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a legend. Qing Lei shook her head with a smile. The answer that he had expected made Yin Nuoxing a little depressed. It was not easy to come here, and he seemed to have found some clues. But now he had to give up so easily. According to the characteristics of that strange altar, it was not easy for him to find a chance to get close to it, but he could not get any substantial results. It was very likely that this opportunity would slip away. With the characteristics of the altar, it was completely possible for it to lead the masters of the gods to escape from the void. This world, this starry sky, this galaxy must be. Perhaps it was related to that altar. But as to how it was related, He really did not know. Then, what should we do now? Seeing that he did not speak, the little angel asked again. Yin Nuoxing pressed his palm on his face and rubbed it hard. After a while, he let out a long breath and faced the little angel with a face full of joy. Explode, right? A certain dumbfounded fake little angel was stunned. Huh? Chapter 1234. If he couldn't make a decision, he would first take a look. If he still couldn't make a decision, then he would just blow something up. As for what to blow up, how to blow it up, and how it would turn into, it was really hard to say. He hadn't thought about it in detail. Anyway, first he had to do something. It wasn't a good idea to just look at this strange altar engraved here. Instead of waiting anxiously, he might as well take action. For example, he could blow something up. Some mechanisms were also triggered in such a strange way. If he blew it up, he might be able to find something unexpected. Then, a certain destructive maniac would also be ready to blow it up. The energy was already condensing. Wait a minute, the fake little angel exclaimed. She quickly jumped over and pressed down his raised hand. She glanced at Qing Lei, who didn't react at all. She heaved a sigh of relief. You little rascal, blow up this place or something, she stammered for a while. After a while, she said, what if the clue is here, but you blew it up by mistake? Wouldn't we have come here for nothing? Then we'll talk about it after we destroy it. Yin Nuoxing frowned fiercely. She raised her other hand. A dark and chaotic energy crazily condensed. Then it was pressed down by the little angel again. It's not that I want to say this, but anyway, it's this world, right? We're the ones who are most worried about it. I don't believe that it won't come out. Yin Nuoxing's eyes widened. She was about to break free from her grip and continue condensing energy when Qing Lei suddenly realized or thought of something. She jumped up excitedly. Big sister, Then, as soon as she turned her head, she saw Yin Nuoxing and the little angel entangled together in an extremely ambiguous position. Their faces were close to each other, and lilies bloomed one after another. In an instant, her pretty face flushed with excitement. She quickly covered her sparkling eyes with both hands. Hearing the sound, the two people turned their heads together. When they saw Qing Lei's strange action, they were stunned. The two people looked at each other and quickly let go of their hands. Ahem, what's wrong? Did you remember something or discover something? Yin Nuoxing coughed dryly and hurriedly went forward to greet her. Qing Lei covered her face with both hands, looking like she didn't see anything. When she saw Yin Nuoxing walking over, she chuckled. Big sister, I just remembered something. It's about the altar of origins. Yin Nuoxing looked at her curiously and didn't ask any questions. She just waited quietly for her to speak. After pondering for a while, she said, if I'm not mistaken, there should be 2 altars of origin. 2. Yin Nuoxing was stunned. What's the other one for? No, speaking of which, what are these 2 altars for? You don't know. We don't have any faith, and we don't have an object of worship. What is this altar of origins used for? Qing Lei shook her head. I don't know either. 2 altars. Yes, that's what the legend says. However, we don't know what exactly is going on or who passed it down. We only know that they have appeared since ancient times. Let me think. I should remember the origin of the legend. Yin Nuoxing waited patiently. But before Qing Lei could think of a reason, the entire dark and grayish-white land suddenly trembled, causing the 3 of them to tremble. Suddenly, they felt that the light in the sky had become unusually bright. They turned around abruptly, only to see a huge corona suddenly appear in front of them. It was a huge sun, a sun formed by the remains of the sun. It was smaller than a planet, but retained most of the original sun's weight. The light that was extremely fatal to mortals shone on the satellite in front of the shadow continent. The satellite of Wei Su had blocked most of the fatal light. Even though Yin Nuoxing jokingly called it the remains of the sun, it still had enough light and heat. Its light could directly blind most of the living beings. However, with the existence of the order barrier, Qing Lei saw this scene directly. Her eyes widened. This shocking scene was instantly branded in her eyes and could no longer be erased. The remains of the sun, Wei-Su's satellite, and the shadow continent. The three of them were connected together in a line. Standing on the shadow continent, they could see the satellite being burned by the light of Wei-Su. The huge gravitational force was enough to distort time and pull it towards Wei-Su. The entire satellite was burning with brilliant fireworks. Looking from this angle, the brilliant sea of fire of Wei-Su's starry corona had a huge sense of oppression. It was as if it was going to swallow them together with the huge planet. So beautiful. Qing could not help but murmur. The light that was enough to blind almost all living beings was filtered by the order barrier, allowing her to easily see it without being hurt. She called this shocking and even terrifying scene beautiful. It inexplicably made Yin Nuoxing a little happy and proud. She could not help but mutter, "This is a scene that ordinary people can't see. It exists in the starry sky. There are countless such scenes in the entire starry sky. They burn alone in the deep and dark starry sky. No one can see them. You are a lucky one." Qing stared blankly at this scene. She did not even have the time to speak. She watched the huge satellite of Wei-Su in front of her distort in her sight. Its surface became unrecognizable. The scorching sunlight even changed the storm. Its shape had turned into an oval. The high-arched end was facing the sun, dragging a long trail of golden flames. It seemed that it would fall into the brilliant sea of fire at any time. The speed of movement of this planet and this continent is too strange. The little angel quietly floated to Yin Nuoxing's side and whispered in his ear. Just now, it was still sweeping across the starry sky at an extremely high speed. Then, when it came to this place, it suddenly slowed down. It feels like it was hurrying across the starry sky just to rush back to this place. Yin Nuoxing casually replied. Then he asked, "Is there any reaction from the power of Divine Destroyer on that planet?" No, you can say that there is." Just as he shook his head, he was stunned. Then he helplessly sighed and said, "The power of Divine Destroyer on that planet has all quieted down. It had just quieted down. The moment the sun shone on it, it restrained all of its presence. Now, anyone who looks at it will only see a red storm. Even I can't feel the slightest bit of the power of Divine Destroyer." Yin Nuoxing was stunned. "Restrained? What do you mean by restrained?" "I don't know. Don't ask me. I also want to know. Anyway, this is how it is. It can't be helped whether you believe it or not." The little angel shook his head helplessly. The three of them stood side by side and looked at this gorgeous and extremely spectacular scene. Now, the satellite of Wei-Su was moving very slowly. It was so slow that it was very deliberate. It was so slow that it was very strange. Just like what it said, it was as if it had deliberately rushed back from the starry sky. Like a timid child, it shrank in its cradle and shivered. Even if it would be devoured by the flames, it did not have a second choice. This shadow continent is very lucky. Originally, according to the speed of Wei-Su and the continent's own speed, the shadow continent would be directly exposed to the sun. It would be in a position closer to the sun than Wei-Su. But now it has almost completely stopped. If the shadow continent rotates according to this trace, it will definitely not face the fatal sun directly. As the little angel spoke, it cast its gaze on the grayish-white land, and then looked inside the black land. The sun shone its blazing light on its satellite. The latter received such a huge amount of sunlight that it almost ignited, turning into a second giant sun in the starry sky. It also spread a part of the heat and scattered it on the shadow land. The black land should have been an extremely solid land. At this moment, when the second star blocked the light, it also received a huge amount of light. The heat was enough to melt the dark land. This black land is probably going to melt, probably because of the black color. Yin Nuoxing pointed to the black land in the distance, the side closest to the sun, and we happen to be in the grayish-white area behind it. It won't be too hot, and the land won't melt. Otherwise, this ancient city wouldn't have been preserved. Well, it's the light. I can't see anything. Qinglei looked for a while and felt pain in her eyes. She rubbed her eyes and quickly squatted down. Yin Nuoxing heard and couldn't help but shake his head. What else do you want to see? This is the place closest to Wei Su. It, and you are the first discoverers of this place. After that, he couldn't help but tease. By the way, if you remember this scene and bring it back, it might attract the attention of others. If you want to show off, you have to find something more impressive, right? The little angel couldn't help but roll her eyes. This guy was fooling her again. Not to mention the things here. Even if Qinglei ran back and told them, would anyone believe her? Would anyone admit it? Probably not. Yin Nuoxing suddenly paused and quickly narrowed his eyes. His eyes glinted with divine light as he looked towards the direction of the huge planet. That huge planet filled with countless gases had come here at an uncanny speed, sheltering the shadow continent with a strange angle and gravity. Now, the blazing light shone into the interior of the planet, and the long red and black light that stretched out represented the remnant sun devouring its own satellite. At that moment, the extreme storm suddenly changed. On the side of the planet facing them, the huge storm became much thinner, as if the storm was gradually stopping. However, if one looked closely, they would find that something was not right. The color at the edge of the storm was still abnormally thick and exaggerated. The wind was still blowing over the planet, and it was a vast storm that blew from the planet's core to its surface. At that moment, all of them were gathering towards the other side. The storm that had covered the entire planet was now gathering towards the side, directly illuminated by the sun, becoming an even more exaggerated and terrifying storm that encompassed the entire hemisphere. If a storm of this scale were to be placed in the divine realm, it could probably destroy an entire large city in minutes. Of course, that was if the city's defensive circle was not activated. The storm on the planet's surface seemed to have melted completely. The melted liquid flowed in one direction, condensing and solidifying into an even bigger storm that resisted the sunlight from the other side. However, the layer of red and gold flames did not show any signs of weakening, as if a huge energy barrier had enveloped the entire planet. Under such circumstances, it did look like an energy barrier, and any normal person who came into contact with it would definitely die. Nonsense. If it were a normal person, they would have been burned into gas by the sun when the planet brought them here. Boom! A dull and restless sound came from the ground beneath their feet and traveled through their soles to every part of their body. Yin Nuoxing's body trembled slightly before stabilizing, and he still had the strength to reach out and support Qinglei, who was almost sent flying by the shock. What's wrong now? She looked around nervously and could not help but gulp, and her grip on Yin Nuoxing's arm tightened slightly. If you ask me, I can give you an answer. I just don't think you'll like it. Yin Nuoxing raised his head and let out a stiff ah. After a long while, he stretched out a finger and pointed at the ground beneath his feet. He smiled slightly and said, "The shadow continent under our feet seems to be falling into it." Qinglei glanced at the grayish-white ground, and then looked at the approaching satellite of Wei Su. She knew what he said was true. She forced a smile and suddenly fainted. Wei Su's satellite was very close to its home planet at this moment, coupled with a layer of light that was attracted by the huge gravitational force. It could be said that the layer of light was Wei Su's star corona. The moment it fell into it, it would probably be killed by the temperature there. The modified version of the sun. The modified version means that it has been processed. It's not that there's anything extra. It was originally just a sun, but one day, it suddenly exploded into countless pieces with a bang. The fragments and the energy were thrown into the starry sky, and all that was left was a very dense remnant. But this remnant used some unknown method to swallow the remnant of the previous sun, and became the remnant sun that we see now. The little angel said as she twirled her slender fingers, "I know about this. Why are you telling me about this?" Yin Nuoxing was stunned. "I know that you know about it." It shook its head helplessly, stretched out a finger and pointed at his arms, and said, "But this little girl doesn't know about it. Yun Nuoxing hurriedly lowered his head and saw that Qing Lei had already fainted. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This little girl was really amazing. In just one day, she had seen many things that were beyond the limit of her knowledge. If it were anyone else, they would have probably gone crazy when they landed on the Shadow Continent and found out where this place was. But she could still hold on until now and only fainted. It had to be said that her spirit was really abnormally strong. Rumble. A roar came from the star field that was supposed to be silent. It was the sound of a riot that came from the Shadow Continent as it crushed the space. It was like a flagship of a fleet, using the sharp side as a charging horn. Under unreasonable acceleration, it rumbled and rushed toward the huge planet that was burned into an orange color, and the storm gradually subsided. The huge vibration made Yun Nuoxing and the little angel almost lose their balance. It's simply messing around. Yun Nuoxing hurriedly sat down and couldn't help but say, with such a sudden and violent acceleration, if it were any other continent, it would have been smashed to pieces. The front, middle, and back parts would first be separated, then disintegrate and fall apart. It looks like it's going to rush in. As soon as Yun Nuoxing's voice trailed off, the Shadow Continent dived toward Wei Su's satellite with an acceleration and speed that were beyond the comprehension of ordinary people. The tip of the Shadow Continent suddenly touched the layer of flames that had been absorbed. Suddenly, the entire Shadow Continent and the countless fragments around it were wrapped in a layer of flames of the same color. It was as if it had suddenly plunged into the sun. The dazzling light in all directions was dazzling, and if one looked at it for a long time, they would be blinded. At the same time, they were greeted by a heat wave that could burn the entire planet into a beautiful carboniferous object. Qing Lei woke up in a daze. When she saw the orange-red scene in front of her and the huge sun slowly descending, she immediately knew where she had rushed into. Her head tilted, and she fainted again. Yun Nuoxing felt that the girl was really unconscious this time. This was actually good news. God knew why such a thing suddenly happened, but since it had happened, it was useless to pursue it. Adhering to the mentality of taking things as they came, Yun Nuoxing had long been mentally prepared. When he rushed into this damned Yongdan realm, he was already mentally prepared to fight to the death with an army of 10 billion. Although when he rushed in, he saw an even more terrifying scene. In short, he had always been in a state of readiness. He had long been prepared to blow up something or be blown up by something. Within a few minutes, the Shadow Continent had rushed into the atmosphere of the Vesuvius satellite. All that could be seen were red and orange hues. The storm had disappeared, and in its place was a solid land. I've really seen a ghost this time. Yun Nuoxing's cheeks twitched. With a calm smile on his face, he said, a solid, solidified land suddenly appeared on a planet full of strange gases and the power of divine destruction. Are you kidding me? The little angel glanced at him and shook her head helplessly. It was no wonder that he was so agitated. When they were so close, they had already taken a look at the strange satellite. Indeed, other than the storm and the gas mixed with the weak power of divine destruction, there was only a scorching liquid core in the center that was heated by the light of Wei Su. Then, when they rushed in, they saw a solidified land, as if a land created by storms and magma raging for countless years. That was a little too fake, but that was the truth. In fact, in their perception, the land was real and not an illusion. But if they were to look at the time a few dozen minutes ago, the situation inside the planet that they sensed could not be faked. So, the truth could only be. Anyway, something must have gone wrong after this strange satellite rushed to Mother's side. Yun Nuoxing carried Qing Lei on his back and shrugged. I'm used to this kind of thing. It's okay, it can't scare me. Even if that remnant sun, called Wei Su, suddenly exploded with a bang, I won't show the slightest bit of surprise. The little angel looked at him and suddenly sighed and shook her head helplessly. This person's mouth. Sooner or later, he would say something big. Chapter 1236. The orange-red land stretched as far as the eye could see. There were barren mountains everywhere, and the sky was a warm orange-red color. It was the light of death emitted by a remnant sun. It was still warm, repeating the passion of tens of thousands of years ago, or even hundreds of millions of years ago. The orange-red light dyed the land in this color. However, perhaps this land of death was originally this color, and the orange light was just an illusion. There was a violent storm in the sky, disturbing the atmosphere and connecting the heaven and earth. Even the earth was trembling. The wind that blew made the sky and earth blurry, constantly driving away the wandering travelers in the distance. However, they seemed to be completely unaware of this chase. Their footsteps were sometimes fast and sometimes slow. The blurry, hazy storm was also sometimes fast and sometimes slow. It was like a cat playing with a mouse. It seemed that the storm did not dare to push too hard and had no choice but to maintain a subtle distance. Big sister, although I don't quite understand, looking at your expression, you don't seem to be very happy. A sweet voice with a little liveliness and a hint of caution sounded in his ears. Yin Nuoxing turned his head and looked. Qing Lei was looking at him carefully. She could not help but use more strength in her hand to grab his arm. After walking on this orange-red land for a long time, the storm continued to gather behind them. The wind blew in their faces, and they rolled and fought in some places. Her adventurer's outfit had long been stained with orange-red dust. Her face was also white and red. There was an unconcealable tiredness and weariness on her face, but she was still holding on. Her footsteps were already a little shaky. She had to hold on to his hand to continue walking. Yin Nuoxing had proposed to carry her on his back. Anyway, with his strength, carrying a person was no different from carrying a planet. Of course, this did not mean that Qing Lei's weight was equivalent to a planet. Cough. Anyway, that was what it meant. They had been walking on this land of red soil and red sand for 2 days and 2 nights. At first, Qing Lei found that the wind storm could not catch up with them, so she relaxed a little. She took the time to talk to Yin Nuoxing about the interesting things in the past, about her travels on the continent with the big guy and exploring various places. When she told the stories, she did not forget to look at the surrounding environment with a vigilant look. Along the way, there was no exception to the orange-red wilderness. Occasionally, a mountain range would cross in front of her, but it was nothing special. It was just a habit of hers. Even if she had trained her physical strength by running, jumping, and crawling in some strange places all year round, she could not withstand such a long period of nonstop running and hurrying. The few times she rested were in the arms of the floating, luminous sister. It was not particularly long. She had been in a trance for a long time, but she still forced herself to be alert, as if nothing had happened. Yes, it had been 2 days and 2 nights. During this period, the satellite of Wei Su had left the orange-red sea of fire and entered deep into the galaxy. At that time, it would be more than 10 hours of night, and only a faint light shone on the orange-red land. The storm did not stop. If it did not stop, it would not stop either. In a short period of more than 10 hours, the satellite once again entered the sea of fire and continued to fall in the sea of fire. Yin Nuoxing looked at her tired face and stopped. He said, "I'm fine. There's nothing to be happy about anyway. Naturally, I can't smile. But you." When Qing Lei heard him mention her, she could not help but shrink her neck. She then heard him continue. "You've been holding on for a whole day. Fan, how are you going to hold on? Why don't you take a rest first? Eat something and sleep before you continue. You've seen the storm. It has been gathering for 2 days and 2 nights, but it still hasn't blown up. Although it's not to scare people, but if you keep going like this, you'll fall before the wind blows." Qing Lei shook her head stubbornly. Her face was slightly pale. She felt uncomfortable when she stopped. I'm fine. I could still hold on for a while. Hee, big sister, you guys are the ones who haven't eaten for 2 days. I've eaten everything. What about you guys? There's only a little left. Yin Nuoxing really wanted to say, if I wasn't afraid of scaring you, I would have enough food in my dimension to feed an entire planet. Huff, huff. Qing Lei stopped to catch her breath. She waved her hand and said, "I'm fine. Let's keep going." Maybe we'll reach. Where is it? She was just trying her best to hold on, just like him at a certain time. She was trying her best to hold on, but she would never fall. She could not fall. He turned his head and looked around. It was a barren land. The color of the land was always monotonous, making people think that it was the only thing in the world. There was no hope at all. The sky was either shrouded in darkness or covered in flames. Qinglei was no longer afraid of the terrifying flames that could not affect her at all. She was almost numb. She moved her legs numbly and walked forward numbly. She did not know where she was going. She continued to walk forward after she finished speaking. Yin Nuoxing could not help but frown when he saw this. He quickened his pace and picked her up without any explanation. Then, he carried her on his back and snorted softly. "That's enough. Why are you being so stubborn in front of me? Look at your face. You're going to faint soon. Why are you still holding on?" Qinglei screamed in her heart. She could not even make a sound. She subconsciously lay on his back and held his shoulders with both hands. There was a faint panic in her eyes as she said, "Big sister, but that's enough. Just lie on my back obediently." Yin Nuoxing tilted his head and glared at her. "There are so many people in this world who want to be qualified but don't have it. You should be grateful to me for carrying you on my back once." Qinglei couldn't help but laugh when she saw that he was pretending to be arrogant, but it was very unnatural. She removed her stubbornness and obediently laid on his back. She wrapped her arms around his neck and whispered softly, "Big sister's body smells so good." Her breath was like orchids, causing his neck to itch and goosebumps to appear on his skin. Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes and sighed unhappily in his heart. This girl, he didn't know how this mortal's body was able to endure these 2 days and 2 nights that could be said to be completely dark. "Big sister, can we still go back?" "Yes, we will go back. I will bring you back." Yin Nuoxing nodded without thinking. In fact, he had approached that continent twice in these 2 days. He could have directly sent this little girl back. He did not know if he was afraid of scaring the little girl or for some other reason, but he did not do so. There were soft murmurs in her ears. She was talking to herself, and the soft murmurs contained some longing. She still had some thoughts about that world, some regrets, some unfinished business, and some family members that she missed. Perhaps this was the reason that supported her to continue walking down this path. After a few whispers, the little girl finally fainted. Her arms around his neck drooped down weakly. Yin Nuoxing stopped to take a look. Seeing her long hair hanging on his shoulder, he could not help but sigh softly. What do you think this girl is persisting for? Who knows? The luminous big sister, whose feet were off the ground, floated over from the side. She stretched out her slender hand and stroked Qinglei's long hair. She said, "There is probably something that she cannot give up. There is something that she has to do, personally, to keep her going. Just like you." "Me?" Yin Nuoxing was stunned. It turned its head. Its deep golden eyes were shining with an inexplicable light. He did not understand it for a moment. Ever since it became one of his people, it had been imitating their appearance in his memory. Its behavior was 80% similar. Occasionally, he would mistakenly think that it was a little girl who had slipped to his side. At this moment, it was the first time he saw it with another expression. He actually could not understand it. He was also in a daze for a moment. Then, he realized what it meant and could not help but laugh bitterly. He had been reincarnated for dozens of eras. It was as if he had been wandering in the gaps of the void, wandering on the edge of life. He continued to go on without stopping. Until now, he did not know what this life, these countless eras, was all for. He shook his head and did not say anything. He just carried Qinglei on his back and continued to walk forward. The little angel looked at his back and could not help but murmur, "So, what are you persisting for?" It shook its head and followed him. He probably did not know the answer himself. The red soil covered the sky, and the storm in the distance never stopped. They walked between the heaven and earth without any signs of life. They walked forward aimlessly without any thoughts. They just repeated the action of lifting their feet and putting their feet down. They did not think about anything. This was a test of patience. Yin Nuashing and the others did not know why it wanted to do this. However, before they saw it, they could only do as it wanted. They did not care about anything else and could not care about anything else. The light in the sky dimmed a little, and a layer of orange flames faded away. Yin Nuashing and the little angel both stopped and looked up at this scene. A crack appeared in the layer of flame corona from the middle and then retreated to both sides. It was as if a giant ball was drilling out of a huge ocean. The water flowed in all directions from its top. "It's dark." Yin Nuashing sighed softly. This was the signal that the satellite was far away from the remnant sun. The sky was about to turn dark. He had already seen it twice. There was nothing to be surprised about. The little angel also watched for a while. It unconsciously flapped its white wings. The two of them stopped for a while and were about to continue their long journey. However, the sky suddenly changed. The fiery light came back. The sky was getting brighter and brighter at a speed visible to the naked eye. The orange color was getting darker and darker, gradually turning into dark red, and then into gold. Yin Nuashing and the little angel paused for a moment, then turned their heads with their eyes wide open. They saw that the storm that was chasing them on the horizon had suddenly disappeared, as if the sky had suddenly become clear. At the limit of their vision, they could still see the grayish-white and black giant towers, which were not very far away. It was as if they had only been walking on the spot for the past 2 or 3 days and had not walked far away. It was also as if they had just woken up from a dream, and then they saw a giant golden sun rising from the horizon with a rumble. The giant golden sun was releasing an incomparably warm light. The golden light seemed to want to melt the planet and swallow Yin Nuashing and the others. However, if it was just light in a star, it would not cause any harm to them. Even if they fell into the sun, it would just be like soaking in a hot spring. However, the scene before they fell into the water was extremely shocking and brilliant. What's going to happen this time? The little angel walked behind Yin Nuashing and wrapped her wings in front of him. This was a vigilant movement. The world did not play by the rules again. Although this was only the case for the past 2 or 3 days, it probably meant that something was going to happen again. The sun that was supposed to set suddenly appeared in front of them. To be more precise, the satellite suddenly turned in a circle and exposed the side that was not illuminated by the sun. Their buttocks were burning with pain. Well, that was what it meant. "Ask me." Yin Nuashing blew out a breath of air in front of him. His divine power expanded in front of him along with the elements of nirvana, forming a circular energy barrier that was 1,000 feet wide, enveloping the entire land. Who am I supposed to ask? However, they could still see what was happening in front of them clearly. They were falling at this moment. Logically speaking, they should have floated up and fallen towards the wreckage of the sun, as if they were falling from the sky. However, it was a very strange thing. No, since the world did not play by the rules, there was nothing strange about it. The satellite was falling towards the sun that was smaller than it was. In the end, no one knew whether it would swallow the wreckage or the wreckage would swallow it. Anyway, something's going to happen. I just don't know if it's a good thing, or before Yin Nuashing could finish, the land suddenly trembled. Then, the entire satellite accelerated and fell downwards. The sight left Yin Nuashing and the little angel stunned. It was all too familiar. It happened when they stood on the shadow continent, and now it was happening again. While the two people were stunned, the satellite of Vesuvius was falling towards Vesuvius in a straight line at an unimaginable speed. It was like a person who had given up on struggling and plunged into magma. And just like that, they plunged in. The golden corona rapidly enlarged before their eyes. Yin Nuashing could feel the hot wind rushing towards them. Particles of light streaked past them. The light from countless years ago shone on him, causing him to squint slightly. In his line of sight, there was something wrong with the Vesuvius. Under the golden corona, there was a black hole faintly discernible. However, the layer of corona was very thick and was tainted with the power of the divine destroyer of the satellite. It was a little abnormal and difficult to see through. It was like an illusion at a glance. This state did not last long. They watched as the golden light in front of them became brighter and brighter. Finally, they felt as if they had entered water and passed through the star corona. In their minds, there was the sound of falling into water. What entered their eyes was not a golden ocean. There was nothing strange. There was only darkness. This is really beyond my expectations. The little angel could not help but exclaim. They could not see the golden border in front of them. However, they could see a circular layer of gold behind them. It was like a surging flame. It was the sun of Vesuvius. Yin Nuashing shrugged, indicating that he was used to it. After all, he had lived for a long time and had seen many things. Such bizarre things were nothing to him. He had seen many of them, although it was really magical. In front of them was an unknown darkness. It was as if they had rushed into the void. However, there was no smell of the void. It was not a land of nothingness either. It was just darkness, endless darkness. The shrinking golden circle behind them told them that they were going deeper into the darkness. He looked down and saw that the satellite of Vesuvius had disappeared. Only the 100 feet of land that was shrouded by his aura was left. Fortunately, there was still a place to stand. Yin Nuashing sat down cross-legged and placed Qing lay on the ground beside him. He took out a soft pillow from his pendant and placed it on her. Then, he started to wait in boredom. Say, where do you think we'll go this time? Where? It repeated and shook its head. I don't know, but I hate this dark place. I thought you would feel a sense of familiarity. Yin Nuashing smiled and raised his eyebrows at it. Isn't your world dark too? There's nothing. The little angel bent its knees and sat back to back with Haorun. It hugged its knees and said, so, I hate it. After I came out and saw the reality, I hated it even more. It's dark, empty, and there's nothing. I'm the only one in the whole world. Yin Nuashing patted its head. You don't want to go back after seeing the prosperity of the reality? Yes, it admitted generously. It was probably the instinct of life to pursue beautiful things. Even a strange life, like it was no exception. Yin Nuashing leaned back and stretched out his legs. He looked at the dark place in a daze. Gradually, he fell into a state of thinking about life again. He quickly woke up and casually found a topic to talk about. How long do you think it will take this time? There was no sound behind him. Yin Nuashing was stunned for a moment. However, the back he leaned against was still warm. There was also a faint breathing sound, which meant that it was still here. It just didn't know why there was no sound. Maybe it was also in deep thought. Looking at the dark space, it seemed like it had returned to its hometown. It was rare for a wanderer to come back. What was it thinking about? What are you thinking about? After a long time, Yin Nuashing finally couldn't help but speak again. This time, he reached out his hand and touched the pair of wings hanging by the side. This woke up the little angel who was thinking about life. Are you in a daze? Yin Nuashing heard the movement and asked again. He was stunned for a moment. He looked around and said, Can't you hear those sounds? Yin Nuashing was shocked. His whole body trembled. Why did it sound like a ghost story? Sounds? What sounds? In this space, in the middle of this darkness, there are many, many sounds. He stretched out his slender finger and pointed at the dark and empty space. He said, There are many, many mixed sounds. I see many things and hear many things. What sounds did you eavesdrop on this time? Yin Nuashing was a little surprised. I didn't hear anything. The little angel shook his head. I have such an ability. It's just that you don't like me listening to your thoughts, so I won't eavesdrop on your thoughts. It's just that you let me hear it when you're in my domain. Yin Nuashing smiled bitterly and shook his head helplessly. And what did you hear? Sounds, just sounds. He was a little dissatisfied with the answer. He shook his head and thought for a moment. Then he said, It's like sleep talking. Dream. Yin Nuashing chewed on the word carefully. He was also deep in thought. Originally, he thought that this world was very similar to a dream. It was like the things that happened in a dream. It was like a crowded but peaceful world. All these changes were too strange. Everything happened too deliberately. Therefore, he felt that this was like a dream, but it was also a real world. This was not their dream. It was someone else's dream. They were travelers who accidentally barged into its dream. As for what the owner of this dream was thinking and what he intended to do, now was the time to find out what it wanted to do. In a dream, there are times when one is awake. He suddenly murmured. The little angel had already woken up from the indulgence of eavesdropping. Naturally, he heard his voice. He turned his head in confusion. Think about what you have seen before. Think about what we have encountered. In the beginning, in that world, it was a very clear world. Everything was carefully arranged. There were hundreds of races, a big world, recorded history, and endless legends. These were all very carefully arranged. Then, we went to the Shadow Continent and went to the side of Wei Su's broken sun. What we saw gradually went against the balance. The balanced world began to fall apart, and chaos began to appear. Then, we have entered here. As he listened to him, his heart trembled. Suddenly, he had a feeling. Do you think we're going deeper or deeper? I think it should be the shallow. But then, there is no way to explain this dark and empty place. So, we can only be going deeper. But the truth is not up to us. It is up to it. Yin Nuoxing shrugged. They should be going from one place to another in the dream. Of course, this statement was based on the premise that his previous guess was correct. This is an invitation ticket, a ticket to a certain place. Oh no, we have already boarded the ship. Yin Nuoxing slowly stood up. He put his hands in his pockets and looked at the front of the dark space. He seemed to have seen something passing by. It seemed that he had noticed something. Perhaps it was a subconscious reaction that he had noticed something. Or perhaps it was something else. Anyway, let's go. Chapter 1241. This answer did not exceed Yin Nuoxing's expectations. Ever since he knew that the altar of origin had crashed into the Yongdan realm and heard that the Yongdan realm had been abandoned, he felt that something was wrong with the overly beautiful world he encountered when he entered it. However, at that time, he did not really think that the world had anything to do with the altar. It was not until he saw the carving on the Shadow Continent that he confirmed this point. Originally, he just thought that the world that was deliberately carved had some special purpose. He did not expect that it was a world used to store the altar. The specifications were really high, using an entire world to store one thing. I'm sorry to cause you some trouble. Although I'm guarding the altar, I don't have much combat power. The altar itself has no defensive power. I have no choice but to ask for your help. The little girl glanced at Yin Nuoxing and smiled slightly. That altar, what is it used for? Yin Nuoxing could not help but ask. He had been thinking about this thing for some time, but it was just pure curiosity. He was curious about the reason why the neurotic old ghost was so confident. He was curious about this thing that appeared in front of him in this era. As for what he coveted, he did not know what this thing that was floating in the void and void was. What could he covet? All this time, the only thing that drove him to look for this altar was his curiosity that could not be hidden in his heart. Other than that, he did not have any other thoughts. Of course, it was not entirely right to say that. He still held on to a glimmer of hope brought back from the distant future. After all, the old ghost's words had touched his heart a little. If this altar could really help him in some way, it was not impossible for him to fight for it. He did not know if this little sister who claimed to be the guardian of the altar was easy to talk to. What did she mean when she said, "It's not impossible for me to fight for it"? Altar. The little girl with long grayish-blue hair whispered softly and said, "The altar is just an altar. The important thing is the thing that is enshrined on the altar. That is the thing that I really protect." So what exactly is it? Hui waved his hand and urged slightly. The little girl looked at them deeply, but hesitated and frowned. I don't know how to say it. This is the biggest secret of the birth of this world. I can't tell if you can know this secret. Huh? Hui opened his mouth and let out a strange cry. He had an expression that said, "Are you kidding me?" Just as he was about to stand up and say something, Yin Nuoxing quickly pulled him back and shook her head. Only then did he slowly sit down and look at the person sitting opposite him with a strange gaze. In fact, he didn't know whether that person was human or not. The little girl shook her head and said, "Please do not be agitated. The object consecrated on the altar is not what you think it is, wandering the void to find someone or something. In truth, the object of consecration exists only because it exists. This world is the one created by the altar. It is used to store the altar and its offerings. It wanders in the void and wanders in the land of nothingness. Its essence is that it does not wish for too many lives to come into contact with it. It is not what you think it is looking for. What if something accidentally comes in like us, like that big guy just now?" He pointed outside with his finger and said. The little girl looked at them expressionlessly. A drop of sweat seeped out of her forehead, and her eyes were stiff. Yin Nuashing looked at the little girl, who looked very calm on the surface, but was panicking on the inside. For some reason, she wanted to laugh, especially when she saw the little girl turn her eyes away after a few seconds. She couldn't help but want to laugh out loud. "Hey, don't ignore us," Hui said in a low voice with a bitter smile. Yin Nuashing patted him on the shoulder and looked at the little girl, who was clearly panicking, with a faint smile. He laughed softly and said, "If that's the case, the object that the altar enshrines is related to the creation of the world. In your consciousness world, you once said that the altar of origins came from the creation of the world, or even before that. That was a world created by the consciousness of this world. It definitely has something to do with you. That period that the lower consciousness world refers to, can you change it to?" Yun Nuashing twirled her finger and suddenly laughed in a low voice with echoes. The creation of the world at the beginning of the Yuan realm. The little girl was sweating all over. She kept wiping the sweat off her face with her sleeves and didn't dare to look at them. She was a little girl who lived on the edge of the world of order and the world of non-order. She didn't have any intersection with any space or some kind of consciousness existence. Although she might have lived for a long time, she was far less experienced than Yin Nuashing and the others. A few words and some details were enough for them to see a lot of things. "You just said that you can't tell, right?" He crossed his legs and put his hands on his knees. He lowered his head and let his short bangs hang down. The gloomy smile on his face made him look like a living villain. "Then, what is your judgment mechanism, Miss Guardian of the Altar?" "Well," the little girl showed a bitter smile on her face. She looked a little uneasy and a little embarrassed. Yin Nuashing rolled her eyes and suddenly said, "Actually, I've seen you before." "Ah?" The little girl was stunned. She shook her head without thinking. "I've never seen you before. Since the birth of this world, you and that chaotic life form are the first batch of life forms to visit this place. The altar is wandering on the edge of the world. It has also sensed the vision of some life forms that stopped here for a very short period of time. It was just a glimpse. No life has really come close to it. It's that glimpse that left some legends in our world. The mysterious altar wandering in the void, or something like that." Yin Nuashing smiled and said, "Oh, right. When I said that I've seen you before, I meant that I've seen that altar. In the void, I had a glimpse. I also saw the thing that was enshrined on the top of the altar. It looked like this." He quickly drew out a long and thin thing with his hands. His movements were very fast and blurry. It was the thing that Yuan Shi had speculated to be placed on the two wooden sticks. The thing that the nightmare had jokingly called bread. To be exact, it was actually the dead man who saw it. He just saw what he saw. Seeing that his gestures were really similar, the little girl was shocked. Her face was full of sweat. The shape of his gestures was really similar to that thing. "You really saw it. You saw it so clearly. A glimpse, you know. That long thing, what is it?" Yin Nuashing smiled. The little angel could not help but roll her eyes. That was obviously someone else's memory, but she would not say it now. We thought about it and associated it with the fact that this guy would either lie still and sleep or go out for thousands or tens of thousands of years. Suddenly, his doubts were cleared. God knows when he had seen it. Anyway, this old friend of his should be telling the truth. He should have seen that thing at some point. The little girl looked at him, a little confused. Suddenly, she let out a long sigh, shook her head, and said, "Actually, I don't know what is enshrined on the altar." Yin Nuashing opened his mouth and his jaw almost hit the floor. He really wanted to say, "Are you kidding me?" but he also wanted to see if she was joking. Unfortunately, this guy who lived on the edge of the world and the void did not seem to know how to lie except for being a little silly. No one should have taught her how to lie. This made him a little confused. The guardian of the altar did not know what it was that it was protecting. This was a little funny. The altar was a little uneasy. It was thinking, trying to come up with a conclusion, trying to guide the world. But it was very rigid and slow. We wandered in nothingness, wandering in the gaps of time. The movement of time is completely different from yours. Before it could come up with a conclusion, the non-sentient fellow had invaded this world. Perhaps because of its lack of sentience, we could not sense it and could not react. It had already barged in like a pure destroyer, causing destruction in this empty world that only had starlight. It even wanted to use its energy to erode this world. But in the end, it did not succeed as it used the power of this world to resist it. But before it was destroyed not long ago, it did not give up on devouring this world. This world was also badly damaged and may have to stand guard here for a long time. Perhaps. She was deep in thought, weighing something. But she quickly changed the topic. Although we are wandering in the edge of this world, we know this void very well. Why did I not know that this void gave birth to this strange life? It can't even be called life. This energy is from a certain... Well, the person who created it said before that it is a certain kind of energy extracted from a very powerful life form, known as the sacred spirit. By the way, the sacred spirit here is not an ordinary sacred spirit. It may be a primeval heavenly deity. That kind of distorted energy that destroys the balance is called the abyssal death mist for the time being. It has wiped out the entire lower plane, and half of the middle plane has fallen. Now, all the lives in the upper plane and the surviving middle plane have joined forces to fight against it. You can say that the entire world of order is fighting to save itself. Yin Nuashing did not have time to tell Hui about this. At this moment, Huey's face was also filled with horror. The abyssal death mist was an energy extracted from a powerful primeval heavenly deity. It was terrifying no matter how he heard it. The little girl pondered for a moment and said, "You called that energy the power of divine destruction, and said that the energy in my body is the same kind. What's going on?" Yin Nuashing shrugged. "I didn't say that. It was the group who created the abyssal death mist." "Oh, that group is erased for the time being. They live in a place called the underworld. They said that it was the power of divine destruction, and the abyssal death mist is the mist of divine destruction. My power and your power are a little similar to the abyssal death mist, so we can consider it as a kind of divine destruction power. It was also because we found traces of the divine destruction power in that lower world that we thought that there was something wrong with that world. A strange creation born from the destruction of balance. However, it cannot be punished by the correct rules. Its existence itself is wrong and chaotic, but it has been recognized by the rules of the void. It is not a wrong product born from a loophole," the little girl murmured. Then, she looked up and sighed. Since the passing of the heavenly gods of origin, this void has really become a lot stranger. Yin Nuashing and Hui could not help but sit up straight when they heard those words. Their faces were solemn. The former could not help but ask, "You know the heavenly gods of origin and the others?" "Not really." She smiled and shook her head. We just looked at each other from an extremely far distance in the void. The gods who represent the rules of this void, the guardians of this void, are so powerful and have such distinct characteristics. I can recognize them even if they don't say it. Hui hurriedly said, "You said that this void has changed a lot after they passed away. What was this void like when the heavenly gods of origin and the others were still around?" "Well," the little girl looked a little conflicted. She furrowed her beautiful brows. "I can't really say. It's just that there are some changes in the dark. Some things that can't be seen or touched are slowly changing. That time, the storm of divine destruction and the void shock disturbed this void. Many things have changed." Yin Nuashing and Huey's expression changed slightly. The void shock was probably the void shock 11 years ago. After that shock, the entire void changed, becoming a little strange and uncoordinated. The great samsara of this era, the void shock, was not an unfathomable secret. About 5% of the people knew about it, which meant that only a portion of the heavenly gods knew about it. Logically speaking, those who lived in this void should not be able to sense anything wrong with the void. Otherwise, they would not be able to live in the same environment. Logically speaking, the heavenly gods would not be able to sense anything wrong with the void. However, the heavenly gods were an exception. This was especially true for the heavenly god of origin, who had transcended the constraints and could sense the void's problems more clearly. He could directly face the void's environment, which was the void shock. Therefore, the heavenly god of origin could sense that something was wrong. Undercurrents were surging and hidden injuries were everywhere. The two of them combined all these things and traced them back to the void shock 11 years ago, which was the end of the 39th era. Near the 40th era, the heavenly god of origin was the cause of the void shock. Based on these signs, they speculated that the void shock had not truly ended. The power of the storm of divine destruction had not completely poured out. In other words, there would be another void shock in the future, and it would happen at the end of the 59th era. Yes, Yinuashing knew about the void shock at the end of the 59th era, but Hui didn't. He didn't know that his old friend came from the future and didn't know that he already knew. He still retained his understanding of the result that he had speculated with Foam. In other words, the void shock could happen 5 or 6 years later. It could happen in the future, and it could happen after a dozen eras. It was something that happened in the void on its own. It was caused by the changes in the void, and it was the result of the void's self-activity. That's right. The effects left behind by the storm of divine destruction were the result of the storm of divine destruction after the deaths of the first great heavenly god and the others. It was like a hidden injury in the human body, which would flare up from time to time and cause unbearable pain. To put it bluntly, the birth of the void shock and the great samsara were all caused by the first great heavenly god and the others' deaths. That storm of divine destruction took away a lot of things and changed a lot of things. Its effect on the void was to leave behind a scar that would never be healed. These are also part of the effects caused by their deaths. It's only a part that you can sense, but it's already a rather important part. Perhaps, for the world of order, this is the most important part. That impact from the void will return the entire void to a state of zero. Nothing happened, nothing was born. It might happen in the next tens of thousands of years, or it might happen after a few years. It might even continue to brew and not happen. The little girl stood up and bowed to Yin Nuashing and the others. She said, "Follow me." Just now, the altar has already made its choice. After she finished speaking, she walked toward the passage that Yin Nuashing and the others had come from. The three people looked at each other and hurriedly followed her. They were also very curious about the meaning of making a choice. "Hey, what do you mean by making a choice?" We couldn't help but ask as he hurried after them. The little girl didn't even turn her head. She said indifferently, "This world has been severely damaged. It can no longer be hidden for a short period of time. Now, the remaining shadow power in this world, the abyss death fog, is fading away like the ebbing tide. However, they have also destroyed a lot of things. It will no longer be safe to store that thing in this world. This world can no longer preserve that thing because of the loophole that appeared." Speaking of this, she turned her head and looked up at Yun Nuashing with her grayish-blue eyes. She said, "You, who also possess the power of divine destruction, perhaps you can protect that thing well." Yun Nuashing suddenly understood. To put it bluntly, this box had become tattered. Now, they had to use another box to protect it. No wonder she said, "It's not impossible at that time. However, little girl, you have to know that I died once 8 years later. I may not be able to protect that thing for you. Now that the underworld is very rampant, who knows when it will die." He wanted to say it, but he forced himself not to. If he said it out loud, it might really be a disaster. Even if it wasn't a disaster, it might just brush past the truth. He was indeed very interested in the thing that existed on the altar. After talking for so long, I still don't know where the altar is. Speaking of which, we clearly saw an altar smashed into that world. Why did we find another world here? We asked. The appearance of the altar is just the shell of this world. It was formed by the energy that leaked out from the altar itself. It doesn't have any special meaning. The little girl said softly. As for the altar, its main body is right under our feet. We was stunned for a moment. At this moment, they were already outside. The dim blue star was burning fiercely under their feet. The tongues of fire were reaching up to touch them. At this moment, the dim big star was rolling over and over. The internal sea of fire seemed to be a little abnormal. Yin Nuashing noticed that the star was crazily shrinking. It shrank in circles as if it was about to collapse. It was like a huge liquid ball. After shrinking to a certain extent, it seemed to be pinched by a big hand from outer space, squeezing it into a big and small ball. Hui was worried that the liquid ball would be crushed. The sun seemed to be remodeled by someone on the spot. As it was compressed, it gradually changed into another appearance. It was the appearance of an altar. It was exactly the same as the altar that Yun Nuashing saw in the old ghost memory. Even the corners were the same. It seemed that the old ghost's memory was not bad. He could still remember the details when he was about to enter the reincarnation road. It was a black altar decorated with faint purple patterns, just like the color of the void. There was only a long grayish-blue staircase leading from the bottom to the top of the altar. It was ancient and filled with vicissitudes of life, exuding a majestic aura. They could vaguely hear the ancient sounds of worship, as if countless creatures were worshiping here day and night. That sound penetrated through time, reaching their ears from the distant past. A special sense of reverence unconsciously welled up in their hearts. It's no different from what I saw. I thought that the real altar would be more peculiar, said Yin Nuashing. The little girl shook her head and said, There's no difference. The altar is the altar. The appearance of that world is the same as this one. Purple and black blended together, representing the color of the void. Apart from that, there's nothing else. She shook her head, waved her hand, and took the lead to rush down to the altar below. Yin Nuashing and the others looked at each other and followed closely behind. They secretly looked at the top of the altar. It was blurry. With their eyesight, they should be able to see everything clearly from this distance. However, there were things that they couldn't see clearly. It was probably some protective measure of the altar. No wonder the guardian of the altar was so shocked when he said that he had seen that thing. When they landed on the top of the altar, Yin Nuashing vaguely felt as if they had entered a layer of water membrane. He felt a slight chill in his body. He could feel the different nature of the space inside and outside. He suddenly had a feeling. Perhaps this was the place that was truly protected by this world. The three of them casually looked at this place. It was very spacious. After all, it was a star that had shrunk to half its size. There was nothing special about it. The only thing worth paying attention to was perhaps the only thing stored in this isolated space. The little girl was standing there, seemingly waiting for them to come over. Yin Nuashing and the others slowly walked to her side. However, they saw that the side of the little girl's face was a little sweaty. They couldn't help but be stunned. They looked at the place in front of them. There was a rectangular altar placed at the top of the altar. There was a wooden stick at the two furthest ends. There was a fork at the top of the wooden stick. A skewer of meat was placed at the top, and a fire was lit at the bottom. It looked like, they digressed. There should be something placed on the two wooden sticks. What's wrong? Aren't you going to take it out? Yin Nuashing asked casually. The little girl wiped the sweat on her forehead with her sleeve. She raised her head and looked at Yin Nuashing with a frightened face. It's gone, huh? Hui Gui shouted. What did you say? She pointed at the wooden stick in front of her with a trembling hand and said, The thing that was enshrined on the altar. It's right there. But it's gone. Yin Nuashing and Hui Gui's expressions were so stiff that they seemed to have been frozen in the cold wind of the southern ice realm for hundreds of billions of years. Only the little angel could still smile. He clapped his hands while laughing. Wonderful, wonderful. Another wasted trip. Thought you're tuning in to the warrior lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.